But I just really want to say welcome everybody this afternoon. I'm Robert Laycock. Many of you know me, but my day job is as Chief Executive of Marlow Film Studios. Don't worry, this is not about planning. Instead, this is a summit really about something convened to understand the brimming opportunities ahead in the screen sector, particularly right here in Buckinghamshire for the next generation. So I've had the enormous privilege of being in the sector my entire life, and so I really want to advocate for the incredible life chances and transferable wisdom it brings. So with us on the journey today, we're really appreciative of the Royal Television Society and obviously, of course, the incomparable National Film and Television School. Thank you to them and the wonderful speakers ahead. And we have another welcome.
Good afternoon. I'm Julia Lopez, Creative Industries Minister in the Department for Culture, Media and Sport. And I'm really pleased to kick off this summit today on delivering world-leading education pathways for film and television. Our film and TV industries are booming like never before, with last year seeing a record £6.3 billion spent on UK film and high-end TV production. The UK has become one of the most attractive destinations to make blockbuster productions, from Game of Thrones to Peaky Blinders and Obi-Wan Kenobi. A major driver of this success has been our commitment as a government to the film and TV sectors through our audio-visual tax reliefs and funding for the British Film Institute, British Film Commission, and of course the National Film and Television School. Our success is also driven by the fantastic studios and production facilities that we have on offer, including here in Buckinghamshire. We also have a hugely talented workforce, both in front of and of course behind the camera, and we recognise the challenge of making sure the industry has the skilled workforce it needs. It's estimated that the sector will need over 20,000 additional full-time employees by 2025. That's why we've tasked the BFI with leading a review of film and high-end TV skills. We'll continue to support the BFI on its review, making sure we maximise opportunities in an area where 1 in 5 young people say their dream job lies. Thank you so much for having me today, and I hope you have a really productive summit.
So we're obviously very, very grateful to the Creative Industries Minister for doing that message for us. But it's just really worth echoing her message, which is extraordinary, and really dwelling on this. 20,000 jobs in this sector in the next 3 to 4 years. 20,000. That's a really glittering prize. And you'll hear today, really, that Buckinghamshire is uniquely equipped to provide, train, and hold many of those roles right here. And as you can see up here, that for young people, the screen sector is the top dream job, right there. If I can get my laser pointer to work, it'll sometimes work. So, you know, it ranks well ahead of anything else. So this is the figure that she was talking about. 1 in 5, it's their dream job. And 2/3 of people would love to pursue or be told about this sector. But actually, in terms of accessibility, only 12% feel they're informed about the way of doing that. So they're really compelling, these stats, and these are available to take away. They're printed, or there's a QR code so you can actually review them. This is data from the BFI and research they've done, which is, the BFI are a really powerful advocate for the industry. So most evenings is going to be conversational, but I'm just going to take you through 1 or 2 things on my TED Talk. So look, this chart is one of the most incredible charts you'll see. So this is an extraordinary correlation between government policy and the ability of the UK to reach its fullest potential. So at the turn of the century, this is to do with film production expenditure in billions. Millions. And then this is the global share of ticket sales. So you can see the first billion of our expenditure in the turn of the century. We captured around about 6 or 7%. And then here, this is the application of the film tax credit. And we then get the exponential growth up here. So to the second billion, we did pretty well, kind of in 10, 12% of the global ticket sales. But then, we get this extraordinary performance just before the pandemic of nearly 25% of global ticket sales. I mean, that is just astonishing. And bearing in mind UK GDP as a share of world economy is here. So this is where we have a 10x impact on really our national economy. and it's growing incredibly fast. But this application of tax credits is a virtuous circle. So, I mean, for an extra, basically, 1.5 billion, we get really 15% global share, and that's a tiny sum, and it shows how effective the catalytic application of government policy works. So that's an amazing efficiency, and particularly of note to Buckinghamshire here. So this is kind of the Potter effect, but this is the Star Wars effect. So when you get inward investment of the scale of Disney, and it's not huge amounts of money, it's just the faith in the sector to absolutely deliver. Obviously scattered through here are amazing other shows, probably made by people in this room, but Potter, there's a lot of Bonds up here. We like Bond. That accomplishment is incredible. So jobs, inward investment, and future opportunities are really directly embedded into this. And this wasn't magic out of thin air. It wasn't just about the political imperative. That we've got 100 years of an amazing sector leading up to this. So 100 years ago, we had the BBC founded, and Hitchcock was here in Bucks. Obviously, the war saw most of Europe's film industries go to the West Coast in America, and that was totally accidental. That was about light and about and not about talent, because obviously there were very few people in California at that point. So 78 years ago, Brief Encounter was filmed about 15 yards away on the high street here, one of the most iconic pieces of British cinema. 60 years ago, we invented the blockbuster at Pinewood, which was obviously a little film called Dr. No, really broke the mold, and we've been doing that for 60 years since. So 50 years ago, there was a scrappy crew led by George Lucas who made Star Wars in Hertfordshire. Kubrick was here in Pinewood. 40 years ago, we had the new wave of British success, Chariots of Fire, Run with the New Gandhi, not forgetting the amazing things that were going on at Pinewood, Batman, Superman. And then 30 years ago, we had an amazing other sequence of classics, Four Weddings, Full Monty, Notting Hill, Shakespeare in Love. So we've talked about the noughties. You just add things in like the Bourne films, and of course the King's Speech. And we probably hear a little bit about that later. So these amazing advances in the 2010s, but then you add on top of that The Crown, Game of Thrones, Bridgerton, Killing Eve, Fleabag, Downton Abbey, Sherlock Holmes, Peaky Blinders. So and apply Bond throughout this. So it's obvious that the world looks to the UK and to a great degree Bucks to be informed and entertained. I think it's worth drawing an analogy here. People often say that the US has the global reserve currency, but we as Brits have the benefit of the global reserve culture. Just really worth dwelling on that. Not because of our amazing cultural history of Shakespeare or Mary Shelley, who basically wrote Frankenstein in Marlow, but because we invent and create culture like no other nation, and much of it just a few miles from here. So no other territory has the reputation or opportunity, but we need to put support for the sector in place to take advantage of this potential. So we are at this incredible inflection point, which is this next slide. I promise there aren't too many slides. So 50% of the world's households are now connected to broadband. And this brings this enormous opportunity. So from 2013, streaming has gone from zip to this incredible sort of forecast, kind of £80 billion sector. So I'll show you some other stats here, but people have declared the death of Netflix. I mean, you ain't seen nothing yet. And we know that streaming, the killer app, is not Zoom or Teams, but it's content, and particularly British content, and the world is so keen. So this is interesting too. This is theatrical, which we do so well at. This is movies for the cinema, but you can sort of see, and this is indicated in the production figures, it's dwarfed by what's coming here for the world to consume content over streaming. So Netflix added 10 million subscribers in the last quarter of 2022. They've now got 231 million global subscribers. Amazing, but that's just the start of it if you look at where we're going. So how's our record on streaming? This is the same curve of what happens when you apply tax incentives to global share. So, we weren't doing too badly in the first this is the invention. This is when Lord Vaizey applied his tax credits in 2013. High-end TV tax credit was basically the market was zip. So in the first billion, in the first few years, we did incredibly well. We've captured 7%. And then as it starts to explode, the industry comes under strain, and we get down to sort of here, where we dropped to half our share. But what we've done through working in basically outhouses, sheds, and barns, we've managed to kind of by hook or by crook get back up to here. Truly astonishing 2020. But if you look up here, it's still only 5.5% of the global share of potential investment. So we're used to reaching, probably 3 times that. So why are we off the pace? How do we pick up the pace? And maybe it's because we need to mobilise 2 things: people, which we're here to talk about, and facilities, both of which are really available with the right supportive decision making. And I hope there are a lot of decision makers here. So, so that in 6 or 7 years, there's going to be 100 billion of spend available, and so this again shows, shows this share relative. It's we're sort of flatlining. This is the forecast. Obviously, this is pretty much where we're forecast as a nation to get to, but we're leaving so much on the table here in this section because in the just before the pandemic, we reached way up here in terms of the global share. So just to be really clear about this, red is the current performance of the streaming sector in the UK. Yellow is our share of the available investment, and then blue is the available investment. So just in the this is where Minister Lopez was talking about that by 2025, this number yields an extra 20,000 jobs. We won't take questions now, but we'll get to it later. So look, this is really one of the easiest bets that anybody can take economically. The margins are huge here. So look, even if, just an extra 2% of the market share is a doubling of the industry. That's an incredible stat. So just that 2% replicates the entirety of our film industry, and it's a rounding error. So we've been up 2% before. As you've seen in other sectors, we've been up all the way to the 25. So there is something that's happening here that's holding us back, and the twin challenges are really clear: it's skills and space. But if we don't do that, other territories will benefit by default. So just to reiterate why this cluster is so important. So this is these are slightly out of date, these figures, because this is from 2019. But this very tiny black dark blob, which is Metro London, actually it's not correctly represented here. It's Hertfordshire, Buckinghamshire, and it's where all the major facilities are. Obviously, people don't actually make film and TV so much in the centre of London. So there's a very sort of tight cluster around here, which is 75% of the UK spend and employment. So I just also want to really explain the culture of, apart from this agglomeration, I want to just explain the culture of the sector. So filmmaking really, culture takes some real explaining. So many of you in this room know this already, but the filmmaking is a brilliant, huge challenge, and these roles are really tough. So they're long days, mostly freelance. 11 hours is the standard contract a day. So the difficulty is when you've worked 11 hours, traveling many hours outside that time, before and after work, which no one gets paid for, is risking burnout for many people. So this is why this point here is for families and for home life. This represents something quite interesting, this heart-shaped cluster. So, everybody recognises it. So, by the way, we're somewhere about here. No, so up here, big one. And so, Warners, Elstree, Shepperton, Longcross, Pinewood, all very familiar. But because of the difficulty of finding space in this common travel area, the brilliance of this is that you can get to any of these studios in any one day from any one other without having to pay for mileage. So look, other people are building out on the fringes here, and there's various anecdotal evidence about why that's complicated. But actually, this is the absolute heart of that engine for growth. So just to stress, no two creative days are the same, and freelancers do these long dynamic days. So in the years ahead, training is going to be so important for this work. All of this being co-located in places like Buckinghamshire is really, really important. Look, I'm personally looking forward to hearing how we collaborate to meet the challenge ahead. And we have a number of really wonderful and important speakers this evening. Please, if you have any questions of me, please come and ask me later in the break. So with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to the peerless Sarah Ogilvie, who is a wonderful human being.
Thank you, Robert. It's fantastic to be here. Thank you so much for the kind invitation to speak. And I'm going to start with a question for you all. What do you think unites this eclectic group of people? 3 murderers, a pornography collector, Karl Marx's daughter, a president of Yale, a radical suffragette, a vicar who was found dead in the cupboard of his chapel, the inventor of the tennis net adjuster, an aunt and niece who were poets and also happened to be lesbian lovers, and a cocaine addict who was found dead in the lavatory of a railway station. Any guesses?
Neurodiverse.
Definitely neurodiverse, I think, is a common thread. They actually all helped create the Oxford English Dictionary. The OED was the Wikipedia of the 19th century, a huge crowdsourcing project in which, over a 70-year period from 1858 to 1928, members of the public were invited to read the books that they had to hand and to send to the editor of the dictionary in Oxford examples of how particular words were used in those books. I wanted to know how many people did that and who they were. So for the past 8 years, I've been scouring archives around the world in order to know where they lived, what they did with their lives, who they loved, the books they read, and the words that they contributed to the dictionary. Some people have remained mysteries to me, despite trawling through censuses and marriage certificates and death records, but most have come to life with an incredible force, as though they've been calling out for attention for years, and to finally be recognized as the unsung heroes of the creation of the world's largest dictionary. They were people from all around the world, from South Africa, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, America, Europe, the Congo, Japan. I wanted to tell their remarkable stories and to shine a light on them, because they helped create, as I said, this extraordinary and uplifting example, one of the most extraordinary and uplifting examples of collaborative endeavor, I think, that the Western world has seen. So the OED all began a little bit like Marlow Studios, with 3 men with a radical vision. It was London, 1858. Richard Trench, Herbert Coleridge, and Frederick Furnivall. They were linguists who were fascinated with words and language. They were part of this quirky society in London called the Philological Society that still exists. I'm a member of it, a lot of men in tweed jackets and bow ties still. And they wanted to revolutionize dictionaries. Rather than being prescriptive and telling you how a word should be pronounced or how a word should be used, which is what Samuel Johnson had done 100 years previously, these 3 men wanted to create a dictionary that was descriptive, that described how people used words. They wanted to document every single word in the English language, but they were really smart. They realized that a small group of men in London or in Oxford couldn't do that massive task alone. So they reached out to the public and they made an appeal to English speakers all around the world to read their local books, write out words and citations from those books on little slips of paper, and they asked them to send them to Oxford, to the house of James Murray, who was the editor. Now, they had no idea whether this would work or not, whether anyone would even send them one word. And this is a thing about true collaboration, right? It's an adventure. You never know whether it's going to work, what the outcome, or what the best solution is going to be. But for the OED, the response was massive. And the result became, as we know, the most famous dictionary in the world. So many people sent in words that Royal Mail had to put a special postbox outside James Murray's house at 78 Banbury Road, Oxford, which you can still go and see. The postbox is still there, and now there's a blue plaque saying that that's where James Murray lived, and he set up a scriptorium in the back garden where he created the dictionary. Now this was, and so people sent in slips from the disparate corners of the globe, and this was not just a project of the wealthy upper classes. In actual fact, the majority of these people were on the margins. They were autodidacts, they were amateurs who actually saw the attraction of being part of a prestigious product, a prestigious project, which was attached to one of the best universities. So I start with this story about the OED because it's fresh in my mind, because I've just written a book on this called The Dictionary People. But I also, I think the main reason why I fell in love with these people is that this was a classic example of how certain tasks can only succeed at scale. They can only succeed by bringing diverse people from different cultures, different social backgrounds, different ages, different skill sets, bringing them together for one task. Also, the OED took advantage of the latest technology at that point. So we're thinking of the mid-19th century here. The latest technology was the penny post and steam engines. So this enabled ships to carry these slips and these words and these books across the globe to Murray's house in North Oxford. And now we're faced with new technologies, from machine learning to visual image recognition and analysis. But you know, the same combination of the latest technology and a diverse team is a killer combo. And as Robert was just talking about, it's people and abilities. It's technology, it's people, it's skills and space. And I'm reminded of this at the moment because I was just this morning at a meeting in London at the Victoria and Albert Museum, where there's a collaboration going on between Oxford and the V&A, where we're using machine learning to detect racist language and problematic terminology in the V&A catalogue. This is a collaboration between a linguist, a specialist in linked data, a data specialist, 3 museum curators, and a budding grad student from Canada who specializes in the history of art. And I've just also finished a book on the Generation Z, which was an anthropological study of 18 to 25-year-olds. And this was another collaborative project between an anthropologist, a sociologist, a historian, and myself. Now, Gen Zers, of course, are the leaders in collaboration. Their social media platforms and other tech enable collaboration on a whole new level. If you're a marginalized queer kid living in rural Scotland who is proud of their Jewish identity and loves the bagpipes, and there was one such student in our data set, no longer are you the sort of local freak in the village, right? You can find your tribe, you can find your fam, you can find other people on the internet just like you, and you can make magic together. You can collab. So they form virtual collab houses, hype houses, and we see this in activism and political movements around trans identity, Black Lives Matter, and the environment. So Gen Zers, of course, don't see collaboration as compromising their individuality, but rather they see collaborations as opportunities to take advantage of diverse skills and ideas. Disparate people coming together for a common cause, the result of which is greater than the sum of its parts. And the Gen Zers who we studied told us that they just won't take jobs unless they are able to collaborate in their work. They want to work in groups, they want to join workplaces with flexible structures and modular working groups, typical of the Silicon Valley style. Teams in which each collaborator has a unique role to play. So it's not just divvying up a large task into siloed specialisms, but rather working together as one to create something greater than its disparate parts. And the 4 authors on this book, which is called Gen Z Explained, we were so inspired by our subjects that we tried to collaborate and to write the book in a collaborative way, just like the Gen Zers would. And at first, actually, this was really confronting because I realized that each of us came from different disciplines with different standards of scholarship, different ways of doing things. As a linguist, I found it very hard to collaborate. I mean, I loved my collaborator, this sociologist, but she was inclined, I would never, there were certain things. So for example, when in linguistics, you will only say something if it can be verified and proven. It's not the case in sociology, so now I've learned. So of course there were a few tensions there, and that of course reminds me of last week I went to this great David Hockney exhibit at the Lightroom, and I'm sure that most of you have seen it. These 30-meter high walls, and there was a moment, and it tracks and shows you the life and work over 50 minutes of David Hockney, and there was a moment in there where you might recall that he said, and the words came up on the wall. He said, "Collaboration means compromise." Now, each of us here who has collaborated will know the truth of that tension. But I also have sort of been training myself that when I identify that tension, I question myself, because I think that it happens when I go into a collaboration with a preconceived idea of what the outcome might or should be, or what I want from it. Instead, I try now to go into my collaborations with a mindset that this is an adventure. And I don't know how it's going to work out, but I just love to work with these people. I love their ideas. I love their energy. And so that for me now is sort of the key of the collaborative projects that I choose to be a part of. And I think that spirit, just to finish up, that spirit of adventure, I think, is the same sort of collaborative spirit that those first editors of the Oxford English Dictionary had. And to be honest, I think that it's the same spirit that I'm detecting, certainly in the words of Robert, but that I think all of us are going to detect in the talks coming up. So thank you.
So we've heard a lot about the creative industries, training facilities, but you have an extraordinary career, and you're an Oscar nominee. You're produced the highest rated show on the BBC. A wonderful collaborator. Your history with BAFTA is amazing. I'm going to ask a really pointed question now. Why should the UK care about the screen industries?
Well, I think you talk very eloquently about the economic benefits, and I think that's plain to see. If you look at the amount of money generated by the screen industries, it's extraordinary, nearly 20 billion in terms of funds generated. And but I think it's also, for me, it's also about soft power. It's about the fact that we are a nation of storytellers, and at the moment we lead the way in terms of telling telling our stories around the world, and long may that continue. You know, I work across film and TV, so I produced 1917, which was a big First World War film couple of years ago. I make Call the Midwife.
Just the 10 Oscar nominations.
Just the 10. Yeah, didn't win that many though.
Better to be nominated than to win, I always think.
Exactly. I make Call the Midwife, which we sell in over 200 countries around the world. And you know, those are quintessentially English stories, British stories. They speak about our own history, and the fact that we can then sell that around the world, and people around the world love those stories, I think is great for us as a nation. So it's not just an economic thing for me. And as you said, it's a great industry to work in. It's the industry. I've got a 19-year-old daughter. You know, half of her friends seem to want to work in some form of the screen industries. A lot of them want to be actors, but actually, you know, a lot of them want to work behind the camera. A lot of them are interested in directing, cinematography. The people here, I mean, this whole place is testament to the skill base that has built up in the UK. You know, over the years, from Roger Deakins, who's a cinematographer I've worked with a lot, to Christy Wilson-Cairns, who's a younger screenwriter. They all come through the NFTS. They've all been nurtured here. So, you know, we are already ahead, but there is a massive shortage. At the moment, we can't get a production accountant because there aren't any available. There are literally none available. Everyone we've gone after in the last week for a new show, it gets snapped up the minute you offer them the job. They've been offered something by Netflix or somebody else. So we really do need to concentrate on training up the next generation.
Well, and anybody who's, you know, had been sort of around noisy 8-year-olds, you know, they pick up a camera before they pick up a keyboard or they pick up a pen.
Yeah.
So that I think is, you know, with this generation is really empowered to use, you know, kind of narrative storytelling in a very different way. So just to pivot a little bit about requirements. So I went to Mission Impossible 8 at Longcross the other day, which is kind of surprising. They've managed to spend $500 million in basically what is Bagram Air Base. You know, only Tom Cruise could really do something like that. It is genuinely one of the most heartbreaking things when you see literally the best people in the world working in a muddy field. I mean, you've worked at Longcross.
Well, we've had Call the Midwife shooting there for the last decade, and bloomin' Tom Cruise in his bloomin', you know, helicopter coming in every 5 minutes, disrupting us. So I could tell you a story or two about him, but no, you know, Longcross is a case in point. We were very loyal, you know, regular users of Longcross, but then Netflix came in and obviously had an exclusive deal with the studio, took over the section where all our sets were, and so we just had to take the whole lot down and move them, and Longcross gave us another bit of the studio, but it meant rebuilding the whole lot at, you know, astronomical costs, because there's just no space. You know, the two big TV shows that I made in the last decade, Penny Dreadful and Britannia, we couldn't find studio space in the UK. We ended up shooting one in Prague and the other in Ireland because there was no studio space available. Empire of Light that we've just shot, again, even though ultimately it was funded by Disney, it was a Searchlight picture, we couldn't get into Pinewood, even though they have an exclusive deal with Pinewood. There was no space, so we ended up building a temporary soundstage in Margate. So, I mean, I know we're not talking just about Marlow today, but there is a dearth of studio space at the moment, and the capacity to really increase the industry, because if they don't come here, they'll up sticks and go to Budapest or somewhere else.
Yeah, and there's something also which is quite complicated to explain. Above and below the line are two things that are very different. Obviously, above the line is something that happens, you know, kind of in wonderful institutions like here, but below the line is quite kind of more complicated. So, you know, these 20,000 people need to have some on-set experience. How do we cope with that kind of volume without actually breaking the production environment? Is there a way is there a way we can think about that? Yeah,
well, it is difficult. I mean, we, you know, as a company, we always take on as many trainees as we can, and ScreenSkills has been brilliant about, you know, funding trainee places. There are various schemes that individual studios put in place to do that. But, you know, it can be difficult for a production to manage if you take on 3 trainees. It's quite a lot to properly look after those people. And one of the problems historically that the UK's had is that we're quite good at getting people into the industry, but you've got to then support them to stay in the industry, particularly people who are not traditional, whose families haven't worked.
Well, let's face it, stale male pale.
Yeah, exactly. People like you. I think if you don't have that network, or you don't know, you don't come from generations of people who've worked in the screen industry, it's really tough. You might get your first job, but then what do you do? So, I mean, BAFTA has been working hard looking at this and developing schemes like BAFTA Elevate, which was aimed at female directors, because again, we have a big problem with a lack of diversity in terms of women in leading roles still in the industry. I mean, when I started out extraordinarily 30 years ago, who could believe that? I was a small, tiny child. There were, I think I worked with one female director, Antonia Bird. She was the only person I came across, and didn't see a single boom op, not a single production designer who was a woman. And now it's much, much better. If you look at our Call the Midwife production team, they're completely, well, there's probably actually far more women than men, but and they're very diverse as a workforce. But that takes a lot of support and effort, and making sure that the women who come in out of film schools like this then stay in the industry and carry on to rise up the ranks.
And obviously there are essential things like mentorship and pastoral care and all those things, which as an industry we've always been pretty bad about.
And childcare.
Yeah. Oh God, yes. I mean that would make so much difference.
Yeah.
As we said, there are long days. I mean, just personally, I had to, as a 22-year-old, I had to babysit Hollywood executives, and unless you're prepared for that, it's quite complicated, and it's a very dynamic sector. I think one of the things that you're really known for is cultivating British and global talent. I've left the list of the amazing people that you work with. Go and get it. No, I know. but as everybody from Spielberg to Peter Kosminski to, and obviously Sam Mendes, all the on-screen incredible. Obviously Michael Ward's amazing performance in the last movie. But if you look at the list of people that you've worked with, it's just remarkable. And what's your view about why us Brits do things so well as creative collaborators? Is there a
Ooh, that's an interesting question. I mean, the language, it's an obvious thing to say, but we kind of own the language. So I mean, I'm sure you get this. I still get when I go to America, the kind of slight adoration from people in Hollywood who think that I speak properly and use the language correctly. But there is a,
there's a sort of superpower in that, isn't there?
There is a superpower. No, but there is a kind of inbuilt advantage that we have, and that also people want to work here. American cast are delighted to come and work in the UK. They really think it's a great perk as opposed to certain other places in Europe where they're not quite so keen to go and work. But I think
that's also true of other territories around the world. I was speaking in LA to somebody who said they couldn't get movie stars to go to Sydney because actually they don't want to be the one movie star in town.
Yeah, well that's probably true.
And so we were just talking before about pre-production for Midwife, which is obviously now an amazing institution. But what was the? You were just explaining how you basically had to you were struggling to find the right people to come and contribute.
Yeah, because there's a massive skills shortage already. I mean, the idea that we need 20,000 by 2025, I think we need another 20,000 now. There are we're prepping a new comedy with Armando Iannucci for HBO at the moment, and even, which is a kind of, you would have thought, what a dream job. Who's not going to want to do that? But people are being offered other gigs which are even better paid, or maybe longer contracts. So even, and Sam Mendes is directing this. Even that team, it's hard to get the people that you want because there's so much work out there. I mean, I know I'm saying that there's masses of work, but actually there could be even more. But we just need to grow it in a sustainable way. We need to increase the training, and we need to increase the space that we have in the UK in terms of studio space.
Well, the really interesting thing about that 20,000 figure is it's a gross figure. So actually, what it takes account of is the people who are being burnt out by the exhausting conditions. So, as you were saying, continuing and making sure that there's kind of a track record for people to have sustainable careers.
Yeah.
That means that we're shedding a lot of crew who bring that expertise, and they just simply don't want to travel too far each day, and they don't want to burn themselves out.
Yeah, I mean, that's why people love, we all love Buckinghamshire, because it is the best place to work. It's, there's so many opportunities here, and it not just people living in Bucks, but I live in Oxfordshire. It's great. It's a really easy commute. And it's just a great place to work. So the more you can do to kind of encourage that, the better, all of you decision makers.
Well, thank you very much for coming today, and really appreciate it.
Thank you, Robert.
I'm Jen Sobol. I'm the senior manager at Warner Brothers Discovery for our creative talent programs, and that forms part of our overall diversity, equity, and inclusion function at the company. And I'm here with Marcus Thomas, writer-director, who we had the pleasure of supporting and working with on one of our flagship talent schemes on House of the Dragon during season 1. So I'll spend most of this slot speaking to Marcus and getting his views firsthand on kind of, how do these talent development schemes work? If so, what does work? What doesn't work so well? And maybe just taking a bit of what was just spoken about in the previous session about what is it about the film industry or the screen industries that we kind of need to demystify so that we can increase, we can get closer to this 20,000 figure, because I know that there's still a disconnect between, people wanting to get in and just not understanding how to do it or where to go. And as a business, we want to attract the best storytellers, and we want to be able to connect those storytellers to our franchises and to our brands and to our different businesses so that they can produce and create the most compelling and diverse content for our world audiences. But we also want to do it in a way that's representative, that's authentic, so that when we're showing this on screen, that it really is representing the rich tapestry of cultures and communities that we're telling stories about. But as was mentioned in the previous panel, it's notoriously difficult for some people to break into this industry. Unless you know somebody, you come from a certain background, it can be hard to find those entry points or even just understand how it all works. So that's kind of where the work that we do at Warner Brothers as part of our creative talent programs starts. It's about providing access points for people from all backgrounds to get into the industry and work with us. And then once they come in, it's about us creating an environment for them which helps them do their best work. So what we're doing is relatively new, but one of our first programs that we did in the space was working on season one of House of the Dragon. And we had production placements across the entire production, but two of those placements were working as director shadows, so working under the series directors for the entirety of the show, from pre to shoot all the way through post. And I think it was 13 months in total.
16, yeah.
16 months in total on House of the
yeah.
Dragon. And Marcus was there alongside a colleague Oz. So congratulations for being the first director shadow on House of the Dragon. So how is it for you, for 16 months working under Miguel Sapochnik, Claire Kilner, Gita, in terms of your career and helping you understand what it's like to work on a major production?
Yeah, so I think the first thing which was really eye-opening about being on a production like that is from the outside it seems impossible, but literally from being there immediately 70 to 80% of the job I could probably already done from like having trained here and the knowledge that I'd gained. but I wouldn't have known that unless I got on that set and saw it. And in terms of seeing the directors up close and how they worked, like Claire Kilner and Miguel, as you were saying, what was important was seeing that the difference in personalities, and they all have completely different contrasting styles of working. So I think what that does then is it normalizes however I've found my way of working. I just need to lean into that and kind of just learn to deliver that within a wider system, really. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. And I guess being on a production like that, you had kind of really unprecedented access to some of the other departments as well. And how was that networking process? Like, was that quite valuable to you as kind of developing your skills in other departments as a director?
Yeah, I think that was what was great about the scheme was we literally had a pass which allowed us to go everywhere. And during COVID, that was a very, very prized possession because not everyone could. And what we could do then was not necessarily have to just harass the directors all the time, so they felt like they had like a little brother hanging around them the whole time. We could be in a meeting and that we'd hear what the directors were kind of like saying regarding like a certain scene or set piece or however else, and we'd then follow all of those decisions around each department and just go like, do you mind if we spend an hour with you? Do you mind if we kind of like go here and catch up? And we'd literally just go from department to department to warehouse and just see how things were shaping up when the directors wasn't there, the work they were doing behind the scenes, how like those small pieces of direction then kind of filter out everywhere and get bigger and bigger, and people bring their own creativity to things. So I think what that then allows you to do for me personally is to kind of learn the amount you need to delegate and to trust and demystifies everyone's jobs on the set. So then when I'm going into this situation myself and directing, I'm not trying to fight everyone to like do things myself, because you don't need to do that.
Didn't you have a code word or a code sentence on set, which was when the directors asked you to go get a smoothie, it means get out of the room?
Yeah, that was one of the first things I've set up as think of a word. Yeah, and smoothie was the one. Yeah, we didn't get something one.
So we're hearing today a lot, I think, on the program from policymakers, people that work in education, people that work in the industry, but being firsthand, taking part in a talent development scheme, and you've done other ones. You've done BAFTA Crew as well, and you're also now on an NFTS Disney scheme. So what about these talent development schemes works? What's good about them, but also what doesn't work? What could work better from your experience?
Yeah, that's a tricky one to say, and I wish I had answers. But I think that the best thing about the House of Dragon thing was that I got paid properly. And it sounds like really basic, but it's really, really important because essentially like the before I got into the film school and stuff, I had to do the film stuff on the side of my full-time job, which was being a video producer, and I burnt out every 2 or 3 months, like consistently for 3 years. And if people aren't being paid, then that risks people kind of dropping out of the industry. Or for me, like I would have to get another full-time job and put all of my time and energy into that, which then will delay me getting into the industry by however long, when I'm capable of doing the job. So I think that's the thing is making sure people get paid and making sure that there's something at the end of the pathway as well, because there's a leap you seem to have to take to actually be able to do the job when it should be a step. And I think that's where we are, I think.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so can you tell everyone here what you've gone on to do since being a director shadow, how that's helped you get to the next stage in your career?
Yeah. So I'm still working on that, but still waiting for at least the first director job. But as you were saying, I got selected to do this Disney short film with an original project, which is great. Otherwise, it's just lots and lots and lots and lots of conversations about what's next. Like I've got features which I'm kind of working on, long form projects, and just waiting for someone to bite, basically. But it doesn't. I think from being on it, on the show for so long, like I don't have this block in my head where I've put a limit on myself where I want to go. I want to be working on the biggest things possible. And so now that I know what that looks like, it's just a case of just doing the work to take the steps. There's no mystery to it. It's just carrying on, really. Yeah.
We're also talking a lot today about diversity and inclusion. You know, that's a big topic in the when we're talking about screen industries. And from your point of view, do you think that the industry is becoming more accessible and more inclusive from your experiences?
Yeah, I do think it is. There's a lot more that can be done, I think. And I think if we ever think that we've done enough, then there's a problem. But I think, I think information is way more accessible now than ever. I think that's a good thing. Like I learned most of my stuff from the internet, is what I would say, from YouTube. And I think 30 years ago, if I kind of grew up then, I wouldn't be in the industry. So I think, yeah, there is more information and opportunity to learn yourself and be a self-starter than ever. And you can get recognised that way if you're not kind of if you don't have like family, friends, or people within the industry or whoever else, and you can get your leg in that way. But yeah, it's getting better. more to be done.
Great. And I was just going to finish off with asking what's next for you, but you kind of answered that talking about the Disney and NFTS scheme. But you know, with this audience here, in terms of like, what would your dream kind of next 5 years take you? Is there anything that you would love to be doing in 5 years' time?
Yeah, I think in the next 12 months, I'm aiming to get a TV directing credit. That's the plan. And alongside that, I want to get my first feature in development, and I want to have a shot at that definitely within the next 3 to 4 years, I hope. Yeah, but we'll see how that one goes.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Making films with impact is what we're known for here in the UK, and generations of talent in front and behind the camera have been forged here.
The truth is the UK really is at the absolute forefront of imagination and creativity. Over 175,000 people now make a living in movies and TV. And the great thing is in 2015, the UK overtook California as the best place to make prestigious and high budget movies. How amazing is that?
Just as the City of London is a world-beating cluster for financial services, professional services, accountancy and so on, so South Buckinghamshire is a world-beating cluster for the film industry, generating all kinds of jobs and incomes in the wider economy. So for every £1 spent on the film industry, 67p goes out into other businesses.
Our screen industries have a unique opportunity to lead UK recovery and growth. We are already world leaders, creating thousands of new highly skilled jobs and generating billions of inward investment to the UK. But to maintain and expand this global success, we need more well-planned studios.
Inward investment is really important on a whole number of levels. Firstly, it brings money into the country, that's good, and we can make money using the money that people have brought in. But also it brings in new people, new ideas, new ways of doing things. And those actually have been really important to the UK economy over the last few decades.
The great thing about movies is they have low environmental cost in the making of them. You don't have chimneys, you don't have noise. In fact, what you're after is silence.
If you look at other industries, do they have the same opportunities that we have to create jobs for young people that are not going to be made redundant by automation, that are long-term careers, digitally skilled careers, with employment stretching over the next decade? How many other industries can say that they have that opportunity? We have that opportunity in our hands, and we just have to grasp it.
Studios are wonderful places because, we have, I think, the best technicians in the world in this country. both for special effects. I mean, the Americans are always coming to have their pictures made here because of our special effects people are so good. We have a tremendous source of talent here.
We're now a hugely fast-growing, sophisticated, creative industries economy. And we have to match that, first of all, with training and recruitment, which is really important, that we reach out, we create a diverse workforce that's well trained. And secondly, that we have the right kinds of infrastructure, studios that allow people to come and make their movies collectively, because that's how you get the best movies made, I think.
No, I mean, one of the things I love at the moment is how fast you feel film and TV moving. It's not only the styles in which things are made and the fact you can probably soon shoot old film on a camera, but, you know, when I started in the British film industry, it was, you know, very undiverse.
You know, how do we build an industry going forward from here that reflects the country that we live in? That's a major challenge.
And I think that, you know, old habits die hard. My hope for a new studio is that it could be a real campaigner for, you know, change, for reflecting modern Britain, for reflecting the modern world.
And I think that if we can do that, and we recruit locally and we train thoughtfully and with conviction and commitment, we will be laying down seed corn for the next generation of talent. And I think that's really, really important.
Well, I'm going to take a leaf out of Robert's book and introduce Ed Vaizey as a wonderful human being. I think that's a really good way to introduce everyone nowadays. So now, thank you, Robert. No, but seriously, Ed was the longest serving culture minister in British history, serving for a long, long time, didn't you? And you introduced...
A long, long time.
Yes. And many of us think you maybe should have gone a little higher. But anyway, but among your long time, you did introduce the incredibly important, I know, something Pippa feels very strongly about, audiovisual tax reliefs, among many other things. Can I just, before I start questioning him, can I just say, so far, I think this has been a brilliantly curated event, because we've heard... No, because we've heard from so many different angles, and Dr. Ogilvie, Hockney, collaboration means compromise. I mean, what a brilliant thing to say, but it also means success. So anybody around here who's thinking about supporting Marlow, compromise means success. Collaboration, compromise, success. But anyway, I'm not here to speak, he is. So I want to ask you, Ed, first of all, what you learned from your many years was the importance of this particular sector.
Well, thank you, Jane. I think you're a wonderful person. I like this microphone. You're a wonderful inquisitor. I was the longest serving culture minister in history. I held on for grim death. I had to beat the first ever culture minister, who was a woman called Jenny Lee, who was appointed by Harold Wilson. And I got a letter from David Cameron to congratulate me on beating the record. It was a letter which I dictated and sent to him and got him to sign. And it's framed alongside the letter from the chief whip taking the whip away from me for opposing Brexit. So I have a little...
collaboration and compromise.
And one of the reasons I served so long is because politicians don't take culture seriously enough. There's an anecdote about a previous culture minister called Richard Luce, who was culture minister under Margaret Thatcher. And he stopped the chief whip in the corridor one day and said, Willie Whitelaw, I hear there's a reshuffle going on. I'd really like to keep my job. And Willie Whitelaw said, don't worry, she doesn't even know you're there. But we went on a journey, rather like the exponential graph that Richard showed at the beginning, of I think the creative industry is being taken more and more seriously, and it was hard pounding, it genuinely was, because when we took power in 2010 as the coalition, Jane, I remember a Tory Treasury Minister coming up to me and saying, these film tax credits, we don't believe in that kind of stuff. We're going to get rid of them. And I'd already assured the film industry before the election that if we came to power, we would keep the film tax credits. But it was a battle to keep them. And it was a battle to get the video games tax credit and the TV tax credit through the Treasury as well. Treasury doesn't like these kind of things. And in fact, George Osborne went out of his way in his first budget to say the video games tax credit was a silly idea. But the fact is that these are global industries that can locate anywhere in the world, and governments do, I'm afraid, need to provide incentives because it's a highly competitive landscape. And they also, to a certain extent, need to provide incentives because it's a risky business. You are not guaranteed in the same way perhaps you might be guaranteed in other industries of getting a return. You put a lot of upfront investment and it can belly flop. So the tax credits act as an incentive. So I think that they have been wildly successful, far more successful than I think anyone envisaged, including me. And I felt pretty vindicated. I think there was one moment, sort of 2017, 2018, when the UK avoided a technical recession. And if you looked at the figures, the blip that kind of got us over the line to sort of 0.3% growth was the contribution made by the film and TV industry. So I'm very pleased we've fought the fight both internally in government and perhaps externally. And I think we haven't cemented Britain's position because it's always a constant fight. As I say, it's a competitive landscape. But I think we've got to the stage where people do understand the huge economic impact that the creative industries and the audiovisual industries make in this country, quite apart from their cultural importance.
So what is your reaction, because unfortunately you are no longer a minister, to the rumours that these tax breaks are under threat? And what influence do you have?
Well, first of all, on the status point about no longer being the minister, I am now the president of Marlow Film Studios, despite Robert attempting to rewrite history and put me down as chair of the advisory committee. I am El Presidente, so that takes care of the status point. But on the tax credit point, I don't know, I mean, funny enough, we had questions about this in the House of Lords only this morning. To be careful what it is always a numbers game to a certain extent, and the Treasury will always run the ruler over these kind of things. But you have to be very, very careful what you wish for. If you think you're going to save some money by tinkering with the tax credit, you are probably making a very big mistake, because the film studios look very, very carefully at where they can get a return. I'm afraid they're pretty ruthless. There are lots and lots of reasons why, in particular, obviously the US studios come and make their films here. And they do it for financial reasons, because the tax credit is generous. And importantly, it's certain. It doesn't change. They know exactly how to budget to make a film in the UK based on the certainty of the level of the tax credit. And if you start moving it about, that creates uncertainty, which you don't want. The other reasons they love it is because, obviously, as Jeremy Irons said in the video, the quality of the people who make films in the UK, the technicians and so on, is pretty hard to find anywhere else in the world. That ecosystem is pretty unique. But you tinker with the tax credit at your peril.
And can I just say, Marcus, congratulations on your journey. But I think, can you hear me without my, yeah. I do think we all agree that there is this wonderful world out there with loads of people wanting to be part of it, and people like Pippa not being able to fill the jobs. And there is a problem, isn't there, Ed, about our education system and our careers advice. And why is it, after all these years, that it is not understood that what should be encouraged in our education system is STEAM? Is that all right if I use that acronym, not STEM?
Yeah, I mean, I set up, before I stopped being an MP, I set up the All-Party Group for Creative Diversity, which is to obviously support and encourage diversity in the creative industries. And we had a meeting yesterday, but it also became a much wider discussion about encouraging people per se to have careers in the creative industries, and whether teachers understand how successful our creative industries are and what the opportunities are. That's not disparaging teachers, it's simply a case of broadcasting what these industries are doing and what the roles and jobs are. And that cuts across all of them. We had a wonderful person from the Royal Shakespeare Company talking about how they have pre-apprenticeships, which cost about £600 a year per pupil, but this is kids aged kind of 12, 13, 14, really being embedded with the Royal Shakespeare Company and completely understanding the kind of range of roles that exist in a creative organisation like the RSC. So I think, in particular, the work that Robert and co at Marlow are doing in terms of focusing on education is vitally important. I think on a wider level, I'll try not to disappear down a rabbit hole, the barrier between business and education has to be as porous as possible, because the industries of the future and the industries of today, like the film industry, are highly technical industries where the technology is changing all the time. Somebody else in the reel, I think it was Jeremy Irons again, talked about the US wanting to come over here and do visual effects. We actually introduced a tax credit for the visual effects industry as well. So these are highly technical industries as well as being highly creative industries. And we need to start very early with young people, explaining what the opportunities are and make people aware of the huge range of jobs that you can do when you say you work in the film industry.
And Pippa, you mentioned your experience of being places to make productions being snapped up, and I know that Steve McQueen has also experienced this. So our British born creators just don't have enough space. I think there was something again that was instituted under you, Ed, which were clusters. Could you talk a little bit about that and how that fits into the Marlow?
Well, the point about clusters is that politicians, particularly British politicians, constantly moan about not having, to a certain extent, what the Americans have. So, one of the great cliches in politics is, Britain needs its own Silicon Valley. But we actually do have our own Silicon Valley, which is a triangle between Cambridge, Oxford, and London. And certainly Britain doesn't need its own Hollywood, because South Bucks is effectively the Hollywood of the UK. And the cluster effect is really important, and Robert's slide showed that. Everyone is human, and people want to come and work in places which have everything they need. As I said, the ecosystem in terms of workforce and skills that you can tap straight into. But also, frankly, the stars want to have a good time and they want to be based in London. And I always find it very odd in this country that politicians get off on doing down London. London is the world's only kind of global city, in my view, and it's a fantastic engine for the UK economy. And that combination is fairly unique around the world and hugely attractive for people to make the inward investment. The Warner Brothers studio was the first kind of Hollywood studio built outside Hollywood in 100 years. And you need to constantly invest in your infrastructure to show people that you're still serious about attracting the inward investment. There's constant innovation in the industry, which is why new players like Marlow, I think, are so important. You need competition. People need choice between the different studios that they're going to use, and the studios themselves need to effectively compete against each other to continue to offer the best opportunities for filmmakers and high-end TV makers to come here. And that's why the cluster effect is so powerful. Clearly, there are other clusters around the UK, places like Northern Ireland, places like the north of England, for example. But the London West cluster is fairly unique, but you can't sit on your laurels, and you constantly have to invest.
Thank you. I think Are we able?
Are you up for some
Are we
questions?
some questions?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
Can I grab on the microphone? Let's-
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? I think that's all.
Hi, I kind of get the impression over the years that DCMS and the education department haven't really collaborated very well with regard to pushing the creative industries. Would that be a true-ish statement?
Up to a point. I mean, government departments never collaborate well with each other anyway. I mean, we have a Victorian government structure which doesn't work in the 21st century, and it only works based on personal relationships. So luckily, when I was the culture minister, Michael Gove was the education secretary. That may not sound like it was lucky for many of you when Michael Gove was education secretary, but you know, you learn off a blackboard, that's fine. So I managed to get the National Plan for Music Education through Michael, and I managed to get coding into the curriculum through Michael. But it is true that Michael was very focused on STEM, core science and mathematics skill. It's a constant battle to get creativity and the arts taken seriously in schools. To a certain extent, I always used to defend Michael because it was one of the biggest brickbats I got when I was the culture minister. People would use me as a proxy to attack Michael. I would defend Michael up to a point, which is that, you know, teachers are highly skilled professionals and there is still a great deal of autonomy and freedom for head teachers to kind of lean into this. And it is, again, I hope this doesn't sound too provocative, it's quite ironic that the most expensive schools in the country, i.e. our public schools, major on arts facilities, and they do it for a reason, because they understand that parents want these kind of opportunities for their children, and they understand that the mix of creativity and kind of hard skills, if I can call it that, of maths and physics, it's an important blend, and you cannot, in terms of the future of our economy, that blend is vital. You know, the success of the video games industry depends on a mix of technical skills and creative skills. And you can't have one without the other.
Any more questions?
Hi, it's Neal Hatton from UK Screen Alliance. Just a quick correction, Ed. There isn't a specific tax credit for visual effects. I don't know what you introduced, but it isn't a specific tax credit for visual effects. In fact, the structure of the current tax credits actually works against visual effects right now because of the 80% cap that was imposed because of EU state aid law. So if you come and spend your $80 million at Pinewood and you've got $20 million left to spend on visual effects, you're not going to stay in the UK. You're going to go to Montreal where you'll get another 40% tax credit on that. So we're actually losing about £1/3 of £1 billion worth of spend on visual effects every year because of that. And that's the most digital, future-facing part of the film industry, where we've got lots of jobs, the STEAM jobs that Jane referred to, where we could be creating really important jobs that are way beyond media and entertainment, because, you know, the future of entertainment is just one thing in the metaverse, but that also covers, you know, life sciences and all sorts of other spin-offs. And if we're really serious about being world leaders in 3D visualization, we need to protect industries like visual effects and animation.
Good call. I think we tweaked the film tax credit to take account of spend on visual effects. So we incorporated within the film tax credit itself an element of spending on visual effects, which I think hadn't been included in the original film tax credit. But you made a very powerful case, obviously for Brexit. You've made a very powerful case to go to the Treasury for a visual effects standalone visual effects tax credit. And you're quite right. I have no idea what the situation was in terms of the size of the visual effects industry 10 years ago when we were discussing this. But I'm all for that. And the next time the House of Lords debates it, I'll bring it up.
Thank you. I'm Rebecca. I'm from Film London, and we have a passion for training and also diversity into the industry. My question is really living here in Beaconsfield, a lot of brilliant young students and opportunity. I mean, my son is 14. He wants to grow up to be a film director, passed his 11+, and I'm really shocked that the schools in Buckinghamshire have no support for creative industries or knowledge at all. And this is a passion of mine. I really want to get into the primary schools and the secondary schools and the grammar schools. And a lot of the cultures there feel if their children are well educated, the creative industries, they're discouraging them from moving into them as they're not a reliable industry to study. And so some of the grammar schools are pushing drama and media out of their curriculum. And I wonder whether you know of any initiatives that are working in this age group at the moment.
I don't. I mean, but it goes back to my earlier point that I think to a certain extent head teachers have a degree of autonomy and I think a leadership role, as do senior members of the school body. And it seems to me slightly, I mean, I don't want to get too controversial, tread on areas where I don't have enough in-depth knowledge, but it would seem to me slightly odd if you have this incredible world-beating industry on your doorstep that you wouldn't want to take advantage of it in terms of exposing your pupils to the opportunities that exist there, because if anyone is incredibly well placed to work in the industry, it's the young people who are growing up in this area.
Hello, sorry. My name's Tim Day. I am a curriculum manager at Buckinghamshire College Group, so we're an FE college up the road, and we do film and TV, audio post, things like that in a very practical kind of way. So it's exactly the kind of course that would lead on to apprenticeships, traineeships, things like that. I did have another question, but I would like to kind of support that, what the previous questioner was saying. One of the things that we do have to kind of fight is the idea that by going on to these practical vocational courses, that somehow it's not an academic enough route for some of these students, and sometimes we get people who maybe being pushed onto an A-level and then come back and work with us, and they kind of thrive doing the hands-on things, doing these kind of technical things. I've got some of my team with me here today. But
do you have a dialogue with the schools about this?
We have some dialogue with the schools about it, but it's not really the schools, I think, that is the issue for us. I think we sometimes get an attitude with the parents. The students come, they want to do. I've just been at Buckskills show, and we've had a lot of interest in. I was on the music stand because I do music tech area as well as my managerial job, and we had a lot of interest from students. And we quite often have students that they come, they see our facilities, they talk to our team, they talk to my head of film and TV or my head of music tech, and they really want to come. And then they get kind of pulled away to do A-levels. And performing arts, it's maybe an even bigger problem. They come to we can give them really intensive performing arts training, or they can do drama at school and English and history, and it's seen as a kind of safe option. So that's I'd like to sort of back that up. I think. I mean, we do have educational institutions, not just us, but other educational institutions as well, such as here, doing this training. But it can be quite difficult to get some of the more middle-class parents to accept that doing a skilled technical role is a worthy aspiration for their child. And I find that a slightly sort of strange attitude. I'm kind of... the other question that I had, the one that I was going to actually ask you, I'm sorry for going on. I'll stop.
No, I want people to go on.
Yeah.
This is a highly skilled audience, a well-informed audience. So the more people go on, the better, frankly.
I'm very interested in this interaction of STEM skills and creative skills. I'm doing some academic work on it at the moment as a sort of FE, as an HE thing. This is a sort of staff perk that we get, and what I've been kind of finding, haven't written a thesis yet, but what I've been kind of finding is that problem solving and playing with stuff seems to be really important, kind of getting into the equipment, mucking about with it, finding things out, making mistakes, and doing that, developing those kind of problem solving skills. If something goes wrong and there's not an instruction manual, you need to be able to kind of develop the nous to fix it on the spot, I guess. And I was wondering about how the people maybe further along the line than us, we teach 16 to 18-year-olds, felt about how we could develop those skills and what we can do to sort of give those kind of, especially, the playfulness and the problem solving go together. and how we can kind of make that work. So I was wondering if anybody had any answers or anything they could say about that.
Well, luckily we've got John here to speak about exactly all this development later.
Yeah. And there's a new college in London, isn't there?
Is anyone getting a microphone to John? I mean, it is. I mean, again, obviously the politician knows absolutely nothing about any of this.
This politician knows a little bit.
I'll just give my kind of dinner party spiel, but it is, I looked after a lot of science in my constituency in Wantage, and we had the Rutherford laboratory, and of course Rutherford famously said, "We have no money, so we have to think." And there is that old cliche of people tinkering in their garden sheds, and I think it is one of the great strengths of education in the UK that we mustn't lose, which is when you compare us to a lot of other countries, we do focus much more on teaching children how to think and problem solve rather than rote learning, and I hope we don't skew too much in the other direction. I mean, I'm looking at my son doing his GCSEs at the moment, and a lot of it is still very much rote learning rather than thinking. Anyway, I could get
I'm interested to hear. Are you John?
Yes.
Yes. Well, you're going to talk about this, but
the microphone, John.
I was in a meeting only this week about exactly that, and I can't now remember the name, but there's a new university in London.
John, who are you?
Yeah, my name's John Browning, and I am Workforce Skills Manager for Buckinghamshire Business First.
Brilliant.
And I'm going to be talking a little bit later on about the Local Skills Improvement Plan, which is exactly about bringing employers and training and education providers together to solve some of these problems.
Yes.
But I'll save that for later,
okay.
if that's okay.
Okay.
But my point was actually specifically about the problem solving, that the combination of science and art is a way of helping people, and not just kids, the rest of us in our lives. And I mean, you all know this, but special effects, there you go in there and you see people with arts degree, arts A-level and science A-level GCSE. And that's what brings together the wonderful dragon that moves and speaks and so on. It is such a no-brainer.
There's somebody who wants to speak in the audience.
Oh, sorry.
One more question.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Well, it was David
Badly
Wheeler
chaired.
David Wheeler from Middlesex University, teaching film and television and indeed digital media video. Just to speak to what the gentleman was saying about making it fun and playing and how do we do this. But many of the film production courses and TV production courses around universities, ex-film schools and so on are using experiential learning, and learning by doing is a massive thing. Students love it. Staffordshire had a good mix of A-level and BTEC students, and so there's an awful lot of that going on. We need better links with industry, and there's a lot of work going on in that area with Eddie McCaffrey, especially from Middlesex and myself also. And I am very much aware that there's not enough careers advice in school, careers and understanding in schools, so that's a big area we need to work on.
It's not just careers advice, it's advice to parents about
the
potential of these careers. But anyway, let's end with our longest serving minister.
What do you want to end me with?
Oh, just say how wonderful it is being whatever you are of Marlow.
Well, I'm president of Marlow Film Studios, but my greatest honour is my involvement with Star Wars, and I'm going to tell you a little story which sums up the greatness of how the British government works, which is Kathy Kennedy, who is the most important woman in Hollywood, was coming to London to decide whether or not to film Star Wars in the UK, and George Osborne hosted a special meeting for her on a Saturday morning, and I turned up at 9:30, half an hour early, and knocked on the door of Downing Street to be answered by the doorman. And I said, "I'm here for a meeting with the Chancellor of the Exchequer." And he said, "I don't know anything about that." And I wandered around Downing Street, and I thought I could have launched a nuclear strike or whatever. I couldn't find this meeting. And then I came back to the doorman and I said, "The Chancellor's expecting some guests. Do you know where they are?" He said, "Yeah, they're waiting in that van outside. I told them to wait in the van outside." So I took the 4 top executives from Star Wars and took them into this meeting with George Osborne, and they agreed to film Star Wars.
And then I went to the premiere of the Star Wars film with George Osborne, and I've never seen a more excited young man than the then Chancellor of the Exchequer. And when the film finished, he stood there for a full 15 minutes as the credits rolled until the very last credit, which said, "Thank you, George Osborne."
The power of film.
Well, good evening, everybody, and it's an absolute pleasure being with you. I'm David Sines. I'm Provost at Buckinghamshire New University, but I also chair a rather new but quite important organisation that combines amazing talent in the county for health and social care. But before I go into that, we need some continuity. I was thinking about the questions and the issues that you were discussing prior to the evening, and I was minded of an event that Jenny Craig and I attended last Wednesday at the Swan Theatre in Buckinghamshire, or in High Wycombe. And you may have noted on the news that the university installed a new Chancellor, which celebrated both inclusivity, diversity and equality, and that was Jay Blades. Now, the university brought real talent to the forefront to be the lead and ambassador for the university. But during the very early part of the afternoon, just as we were about to start the actual proceedings, we were invited to have a pre-drink as, I hate to say this, but VIPs, whatever that means. Well, of course, we weren't the VIPs, but we were soon to be astounded because within a few minutes of congregating, we recognised real talent from your world actually appearing on the mezzanine floor. So Dame Judi Dench, can you just imagine Sir David Jason? And we did have Mary Berry as well, of course, as one of our local celebrities. But we also had other major and key people who were actually providing real support in the television and, of course, film world. But the point I'm trying to make here is that Jay Blades, with his own voice, his own diversity, was able to attract such senior A-listed actors to actually support him in his actual congregation and actual installation of Chancellor. So I think within the county, you'll hear later from Jenny, there is significant support, of course, for the film industry and for the creative arts, which I think is going to be an important way forward for us all as we start to celebrate the arts in their own right. I also want to say very briefly the important point that was made just before we broke, which related to the importance of practice-based learning, experiential learning, and simulation. Because there is no better way of actually achieving a really high-level career than starting by really engaging in those practical-based subjects. Of course, as you'll hear from me in a moment, we do have to underpin some of the work that we're undertaking with STEM subjects, but do you know what? So what? They're only useful if they can actually be applied in the real world where critical decision-making and risk assessments have to be undertaken. You can't learn that just from your STEM subject. It's about the application in learning and in practice. And that's what I think our local universities and our colleges are really all about. Applying a pragmatic approach to what I describe praxis, which is linking practical realisation and creativity to, of course, an underpinning of sound knowledge. Well, fine by all of that. So what were we about? Well, about 7 years ago, we made a decision in the county that we needed to start to take a rather different approach to inclusivity, diversity and equality. Now, I'm not going to go down the actual traditional route, which of course is valuing cultural diversity. We actually decided we need to apply it at a very different level, which was to start asking questions about how can we bring together disparate voices to build communities and to build a community of interest, not just by the multi-talented cultural diversity represented in our county, but also by the agencies who have a similar challenge when they start to come together to actually have an informed conversation. You may find that a very strange thing, but actually, when you bring individuals together from different agencies to start to develop a community of practice, a community of interest, and to have real meaningful joined up conversations, you have to start at a very, very straightforward premise. And that is to value the actual voices, to value the differences, to value the difference in opinion, and also to be willing to stand up and actually hear exactly what other people's points of view are. So it's about managing disparity. It's also about valuing disparity. It's about building community. So we came together then about 3 years ago in Bucks for a very good reason. We knew that at some point, now past, the government would be passing primary legislation in the form of the Health and Care Act. I'm not going to tell you all about that. I could. That's not what I'm here for. But that Act of Parliament actually entered the statute book in July last year. What it did was actually quite significant, or what it will do will be quite significant, because it brings together for the first time in the history of the National Health Service in England the requirement for our social care colleagues and our NHS colleagues and our primary care colleagues who work in general practice within the NHS to come together to form a new integrated care board to make decisions that are joined up. Easier said than done. Because when you start to identify how you bring people together, you realise there is one way of doing that that's quite a common form of language. And that's to focus on personal and professional development and education and training. Something I think I've been very well versed in my career of realising that is something that unifies people together when you're starting to develop workforces that can work to the top of their licence and to work beyond that when you provide opportunity. So, who are our providers in Buckinghamshire? Very briefly, the providers of our health and social care are Buckinghamshire NHS Hospitals NHS Trust. I was one of their non-exec directors for 9 years. So we got Stoke Mandeville. I won't go into them all, but you get the concept. A very big organisation. In fact, it's a monolithic organisation. In fact, it dwarfs other organisations who need to have an equal voice at the table. So general practice, we have across the county in excess of 69 general practices. But you know what? They rarely speak to each other. They were constituted not to speak to each other because they were dragged in to the NHS in 1947-48, and they've always maintained their independence throughout. Well, fine, not a problem, but now the time has come, one, for them to be valued, to see they're valued, and also to bring them into the corporate decision-making with our health and social care colleagues. Social care, even more disparate. Think of the cash we have in Buckinghamshire, and think of how many people are living in forms of independent living, in care homes, nursing homes, and across diverse particular groups of interest. Enormous number of individuals who require education, training, and to be valued just alongside our registered nurses, our doctors and others. So we had to break down barriers. They're the providers, but then the education providers who really do come together are crucial. So we've got our Buckinghamshire College Group, and you'll hear from Jenny later on, the principal. We've got Buckinghamshire New University, we've got the University of Bedfordshire. Now, of course, some of us compete with each other as universities. Well, some healthy competition's fine, but it's not when it starts to restrict the opportunity to focus on the real needs of Buckinghamshire and what its citizens require. So we brought colleagues together into a room and we had a very serious conversation from Chief Executive down, Chief Executive of the Council, for example, Chief Executive of NHS Trust and so on. And we reached an agreement in principle 2 years ago to form a voluntary alliance of all of the organisations that are responsible for commissioning and providing health and social care in the county in total partnership and equal partnership, not only with each other, but with the education providers I've just mentioned to you. We've also been working in partnership with our local enterprise partnership, our LEP, and also with Health Education England that provides, until the end of this month, by the way, the education resources for healthcare in the NHS. They are then integrated into a new organisation from that date. So coming together took quite a bit of thinking, some creativity and courage, but we were determined to maximise the credibility, the competence and capacity of each organisation, but more importantly, to increase the capacity, competence and capability of the corporate organisations to become a health and social care academy, inverted commas PLC, for the needs of our citizens in Buckinghamshire. So we have now achieved that. In fact, on the 22nd of this month, we'll be meeting at Jenny's College in Aylesbury. Plenty of plugs tonight, but at the college, but why not? Neutral territory between the universities, one could argue, and between health and social care. I think you might pick up the nuances. As always challenge, always competition, but one has to acknowledge that and move forward for common purpose. But we will be meeting on the 22nd of this month to actually agree our final stage of our decision making to form a new social enterprise within the county as a community interest company for the talent spotting, development of talent, education and training for the whole combined health and social care workforce in the county. One final thing I'm going to mention, I think it's of interest. I recognised at a very early stage that bringing the corporate organisations together was vitally important, but we needed to get to the hearts and minds of our citizens in Buckinghamshire. Because as we could wrap our offer around local needs and local communities and networks, we've been missing a big trick. So we developed a faculty of volunteering within the academy, which is actually sponsored by one of our Deputy Lord Lieutenants, Ruth Farwell, who has been amazing. She was a previous High Sheriff in the county. I've known Ruth for many years. But Ruth actually brought to our talent pool a new voice. We have now delivered over £400,000 of income or cash to support local charities to develop major partnerships with our faith groups and with local organisations, which will develop health and social care, support the anti-obesity campaigns, develop sports and exercise facilities, and reduce loneliness and psychological challenge. That's what this is about, but to do that we have to train and educate carers and members of the volunteer workforce as well, to have opportunities to progress potentially into health and social care careers themselves, but also to work to the top of their licence as expert members of our local communities. A new gateway into our health and social care services by developing competence, capacity and ability to work together. All of our work has to be outcome measured, easier said than done, but quite seriously, you would not get the council, you would not get Jenny's board supporting this or any other partner unless we could demonstrate our income is actually leading to measurable outcome and community benefit. So we do have a major part of our role actually linked to evaluation of all that we actually do. So for me, my messages are clear. You can transfer these to any sector, not least the community that you currently serve here. To me, developing a talent pool and a community of interest requires you to be very, I think, bold, courageous, and actually to recognise you're going to come up across competitive challenge, whether it be within particular providers in your industry or health and social care, is not an excuse not to get round the table, to really identify what you're trying to do. What you need to do as well, and you're doing this already, you'll hear more in a moment, but we do have to develop our local skills pool. One, we need to identify how younger people can actually enter our professions and our workforce, because we need to retain them in the county. That is something we often forget. I'm sure you don't, but it's something we have to ask the question, why would you remain in the county? It's a wonderful county, but we still export a lot of talent. I'm sure you're all aware of that. So this is about identifying opportunities from 8 years on, never mind the teenagers that we find in our schools, but 8 is probably the start time when we need to start getting the messages for our new careers, to make them exciting, stimulating, digitalised to actually meet people's actual energy and commitment levels, but very importantly, to provide local opportunity through work-based learning programmes, apprenticeships, and practice-based learning, which I heard so much about earlier. So it's not all about going straight for your STEM subjects, I agree completely. They do have their place, they're very important as part of an underpinning knowledge for a licence to practice. But think about this, our medical education is all practice-based. It is an apprenticeship. People forget that. One of our senior professional, obviously career trajectories, underpinned by highly competent the acquisition of knowledge in anatomy, physiology, etc. It's still an apprenticeship. It only works because people have the chance from the very early stage to dip their toe into the water and start experimenting under a risk management protocol, but to start learning when things go wrong, how to correct them, but of course to minimise risk at the very beginning. Risk-taking is experiential, it needs to be built into simulation, and I think the facilities that this county offers to you all was really going to be exciting to take this forward. Our academy has worked, I hope so. I looked to Jenny carefully, but it seems we're just about to start that new trajectory. But you know what? We are ready now to take on our new health and care board, because our integrated health and care board, or care board, represents 3 counties: Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire, and West Berkshire. We're absolutely clear that we're not going to wait for others to tell us how to do our job here. We've got our own academy now that can stand up for itself, with its partners all signing up on the basis of consensus to develop corporate capacity and capability to deliver locally for our local citizens. And that's, I think, the combination of localism, regionalism, because we have to commit to regionalism with our integrated care partnership across those 3 counties, and also, of course, to be able to export that talent and disseminate it across our health and social care services, both within England and the UK and beyond. So, leaving those thoughts with you, I'm afraid I have to leave you pretty soon, but I'm sure Jenny can pick up specific questions on how we're working together, because that's what this is about. It's actually a case study in true collaboration and partnership, but it's not always been an easy journey. I must be frank, we've had to listen, we've had to develop a new corporate language, and also decode certain language codes that have been an assumption. I'm going to leave you with this final example. Excuse me when I say this, but this is an actual fact. About 7 years ago, I was asked to attend a conference and to develop how we might develop, we heard about the Oxford University Dictionary, a new thesaurus of health and social care terms. Actually, it's over 10 years ago, to develop clinical coding, so there could be a language code on digitalised care records. Does that make sense to everybody in principle? Yeah. Well, I forgot all of that, went along to this very interesting seminar. There were 2 guys presenting from Manchester. I can't possibly even begin to think about the accent, but the 2 guys said, you know, I'm a social worker, and the other guy said, and I'm a nurse. And he said, we were asked to actually come together to start describing how we would describe a person's journey when we were considering their care and healthcare needs. And this is what was said. He said, but do you know, we had to get over some really very basic principles. We couldn't even agree on what the word counselling meant. He said, for the social worker, counselling meant a journey to enlightenment and experience. To me, the nurse, he said, it meant a bollocking in the office. I'll leave that with you, but there's something quite important about joining up, excuse that, but I think it's important to illustrate a point. I can assure you the social care code and the healthcare code do not always resonate as easily as you might think. Hence, valuing difference, learning to listen, and learning to adapt is critical in any partnership activity. Thank you very much.
I'm going to ask Gareth just to give a little introduction of himself first, and then we will start with some questions.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gareth Ellis-Unwin, Slough resident and film producer, currently the head of film and animation at ScreenSkills, and sat here having listened to everyone working out when are we going to break the cycle, because I, as a young man at the age of 14, despite having a job at Pinewood Studios, sweeping the floors and emptying the bins, when I spoke to my careers advisor, I was told I was not academically bright enough to work in the film industry and I should ready myself to go and work for Mars Confectionery, who was the big local employer. Same careers advisor invited me back 23 years later with my Oscar and having just produced the highest grossing British independent film of all time. So yes, education has a bit of a challenge.
I'm Jules Robinson. I'm a TV and film consultant working for a number of different people, including Marlow Film Studios, and others. So I'm lucky enough to have spent some time at ScreenSkills and Pinewood Studios prior to that, but lucky enough to have worked with Gareth, unlucky enough to have started in roughly the same week and had to follow our newbie's speech to everyone straight after Gareth when he talked about how he won an Oscar and had to follow that. So never quite lived that down as a moment of what do you say. But I had this opportunity.
So this is your retribution.
I have the opportunity now.
Okay,
so no, so just be forewarned. Gareth and I have been talking before this about, we want to talk about, obviously, I think David's words were really quite powerful of talking about the application of learning, these disparate voices, the informed conversation, and the need to join them up. I think that's what we want to look at now is this industry meets education piece and Gareth's experience, particularly at ScreenSkills. What do you think, taking a step back from the work that you do, what do you think's working? What do you think is really driving the industry at the moment?
So I think in terms of positives, and we must hold on to those positives, at a time of boom, we have opportunity to bring about transformative change. It's very difficult to bring change around when there isn't revenue flowing through a sector. I think what's really good at the moment is people are finally paying attention and taking the importance of skills very, very seriously. And those big employers are facing challenges. Pippa spoke about it earlier on. And I think the immediacy of the problem right now hopefully brings things into sharper focus. And we have to look at it being a tiered approach to solution, because we've talked about the need to get into primary schools. Well, that's going to flush a solution in 30 years' time. That doesn't solve the issue today of not having the requisite crew you need to make your production safely, on time and on budget. And if we're not careful, we will lose the reputation of being a world-leading jurisdiction for content creation.
So in terms of the programs that are running now, what do you think, where do you look at, where are the bright lights? Where do you think these are the ones that work well, these are the ones that, this is what we need to do more of rather than less of?
So for me, it's all about integration. It's whenever you've got industry, education, the individual and other, whether that other is government or member associations working together, and not playing sharp-elbowed over sort of meagre fragmented funding. So when we come together, we are a very powerful sector. We're problem solvers, we're thought leaders, we're really imaginative. But the slight challenge that we've got at the moment is no one's recognising the scale of the issue. So for example, I won't call them out by name, but we had a Metro Mayor that was taken out to LA, met with a US studio, it was all over the trades, this was a brilliant piece of activity. That person was then brought back, and it was much championed that this studio was going to take up the baton with skills development. They created 10 traineeships when they had 7,500 standing crew on 2 of their productions. So I think we've got to try and recognise the scale of the issue at play, and we've got to lean into the bigger employers to do more.
So how do we do that?
I think by an open-hearted and frank conversation. I spoke recently at an event, and I likened it to this sort of scene in a Tarantino film where you've got this standoff, and at the moment you've got industry blaming education for not providing the right sort of worker. You've got education saying, well, hang on a minute, it's the parents' fault for not taking this sector seriously, or it's your fault, industry, for not giving us opportunity. You've got a whole group of people turning to government and saying, well, we need more money to do this effectively, and in government are going, well, hang on a minute, you've just told us that you're in this massive boom. You're awash with cash. So this sort of Mexican standoff, or sorry, any form of standoff we need to, if we're going to break the cycle, we need to set that aside. And I think it is, to the previous speakers, it's about alignment, it's a collegiate approach, it's no one owns the problem and no one can own the solution. It has to be arrived at collectively.
And I mean, the funding one is an interesting one that you brought up in terms of, is there a better way that we should approach that funding? Do you think there are more opportunities that we are pursuing?
Well, at the moment we've got the sort of catch-22 situation of an industry that makes quite a significant contribution into the apprenticeship levy. And unfortunately, because of its current structure, it's very difficult to realise the majority of that value back. So the big employers that are making contributions to that apprenticeship levy are saying, well, don't come knocking on our door and ask for more, try and solve this issue with the apprenticeship levy. So I think that is one aspect, and I believe that the apprenticeship levy and the UK tax credit consultant might happen as a sort of parallel process of discussion, so one is hopeful for some better outcomes there. I just think that as with all the challenges that we face in our sector, where we're trying to be more diverse, we're trying to be greener, we're trying to be kinder, it comes to the majority employers to really sort of step up and do more.
And in terms of these overcoming these challenges, where are the bright lights? Because clearly there's lots of work to be done in an industry that's booming. That creates opportunity, and it was David Smith at Screen Scotland. He said this has created a talent vacuum. But I think it depends on how you look at that. He saw that as an opportunity and said this is an opportunity for us to bring new people into the industry that never had the chance.
Yeah, see, I hold a slightly contrary view, and it's my personal view rather than ScreenSkills. And my view is that we don't have a volume problem, we have a composition problem. We have 55,000 media graduates qualifying every year. We have 250 training providers. We have innumerate members, associations, unions and guilds that are serving a standing workforce of no more than 260,000. So if you add the 20,000 new jobs to that, you know, the ecosystem is providing enough upfront opportunity, but we can't just keep making that hopper bigger. We've got to look at recruitment practice. We've got to look at the way that we hire. Typically in the sector, we short-term decisions, late-minute commissioning decisions that get passed down. You have to recruit quickly, which means you turn to your own networks, you don't create opportunity. And the big pinch point that Pippa was talking about isn't so much about that sort of new entrant level, and valid though that is, and we need to improve the composition of those that we're bringing into the industry. Most of the skill shortages exist around the pinch points of mid to senior management. So those that have team management responsibility, budgeting responsibility, and all of these things need lived experience. You know, I was a first assistant director. You don't get to be a first assistant director until you've been a third assistant director and a second assistant director. And then you start on smaller productions and work your way up to those bigger productions. And the only way you improve your capabilities is by being given opportunity. So can we look again at work shadowing? Can we look again at recruitment practice? Can we find ways in which in a tricky space, you know, we know the complexities around IP and production intelligence is a much guarded secret. Quite often you'll find something shooting just on your doorstep on the day that they wrap. You know, this is a tricky thing to manage. But I think we just have to work together to try and open up a broader opportunity across multiple grades and seniority and not just keep the focus on this sort of new entrant challenge.
And is that's like the programs, like the Stepping Up program, you know, and developing more of those?
So we've just, I was up on set of Ollie, which is the new Steve McQueen film that's shooting up at Leavesden with Anita Overland, who's the producer and she's also the chair of the Film Skills Council. And Anita had been brave enough to take on 2 of our Film Forward candidates. And Film Forward is a progression programme for those that are transferring into the industry from other sectors. And there's a Southeast Asian lad who has been running big concerts all of his professional life. Like, you know, he can light Wembley, but had never been given the opportunity to come into a film set. Now he came in, he did the 6-week placement that was in a sort of managed, supported way. So to Pippa's point, people need support when they are having these opportunities. And when the 6 weeks came to its end, he was offered a permanent job. And the gaffer, which is the chief electrician within that department, said he was probably one of the best sparks that he had ever come across, and he had been a gaffer for 30 plus years. So this is someone that had transferred in from the live music world into film, was properly supported, and you know is now thriving. So it's looking at those sort of opportunities, I think.
And when you say properly supported, that's quite an important phrase. Like, how do we properly support people more so they can do that?
Well, I think, you know, one of the things I think we need, and I know Jen does some great work up at Warner's and a number of the big employers are doing some great work, but we really need to consider the role of something around the sort of training and welfare role. Because the problem is most of the crew is under too much pressure to try and deliver their departmental work or to stick to budget, stick to schedule. And most people that have excelled within a crew role are brilliant in their role. As a craft person or a technician, they're not necessarily trained as managers. They're not necessarily trained as people that are, you know, running big teams and stuff. So I think the sort of the pastoral care becomes a really important part to play. In fact, on a small shoot that I did last summer, we actually had 2 training and welfare officers, and they were just there to look after not just the entry-level trainees that we were working with, but we also had 2 or 3 people in step-up roles, and they were there to help support them.
Yeah, and that's about supporting people so that they last and stay in the industry. I mean, and that was a point that was made earlier about it's not just getting people into the industry, it's getting them to stay. You know, what are the other things you think we should be looking at to keep more people within the industry?
Well, it's a proven fact that there tends to be a sort of drop-off after the third year of being in the industry. You know, people have gone through education or found work from otherwise, and they give sort of the creative sector a 3-year run. And at the end of that 3 years, you know, they're either thriving or they're not. And, you know, at that same time, their peer group is maybe holding down or have maybe seen their first promotion. They're starting to talk about family life. They're starting to talk about considering buying houses. All of these things that are very, very difficult to consider in a freelance workforce where you don't have the sort of permanence of employment. So I think it's looking at that sort of post 3-year drop-off. It's looking at mental health and well-being. We are working as an industry to try and move towards a happier, healthier, kinder work environment. I think clarity around job descriptions and the roles that people are expected to do, and proper progression pathways. You know, people that go into law know that they graduate at this level, they'll do time of service, they'll get to the bar. You know, there's a proper path there. And that's difficult to establish in a creative sector, I recognise that. But it's proper jobs for proper people, you know, it's that sort of methodology.
Brilliant. Final statement, you know, if one thing you wish that happened in the future, what would it be?
I would like to see our industry, Amanda's in the room, and you know, I've worked on the Future Film Skills programme, which Amanda was a big part of at the inception. That was brilliant. I have to question the fact that our workforce development is dependent on someone buying a lottery ticket at the weekend. That, for me, is the thing we need to shift. We are an industry. If we want to be comparable to other industries, we have to treat our workforce development and career progression with the same industrialisation as those other sectors.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Afternoon, well, evening now, everybody. Perhaps we'll just both introduce ourselves first and tell you a little bit about what we do and where we work. So my name's Jenny Craig, and I have the real privilege of being Principal and CEO of Buckinghamshire College Group. Bucks College Group is very much a skills-based training college, so we absolutely deliver technical and vocational skills to over 5,000 students, most of whom are aged 16 to 18, but across a whole range of different industry sectors. So certainly as part of the film and TV sector, we train over 400 students a year in a whole range of subjects, and I'm looking at my team to make sure that I get this right. But things like TV and film production, prosthetics, CG animation, games design, you name it. But what we also do is we train hundreds of young people to go into the supporting industries as well, e.g. construction students, electricians, hair and makeup artists, etc. So it's a whole range of things that we do, and certainly to the point that people were making earlier about schools in particular not valuing technical skills. Well, certainly in further education we absolutely do. That's what we do.
Thank you, Jenny. Thank you. My name is June MacMahon, and I'm proud to be head of BFBS Academy. Robert has come and visited us on a couple of occasions. We are an academy that was set up primarily to support the veteran community, military veterans. We appreciate from a transferable skills perspective that when people leave the military, actually there's a huge amount of transferable skills that can easily dovetail within the media industry. We've previously run 4 years of creative media production, which is a level 4 course. I'm proud to say that 86% of our graduates are currently working within the TV and film industry, which, as you know, all of you in education, that's a huge amount. Thank you. That wasn't easy, believe me. At the moment, we're looking at the very reactive to the industry. We work very closely with the industry. Especially post-Brexit and COVID, we realised that there was a dearth of skill sets in relation to production management and production coordinating. So we went to our trustees, we're a charity, and we asked if we could get funding to actually start up a 6-month production management course, which Robert visited us recently. So that's what we're doing. Our graduates are going to be leaving us in about 3 weeks' time. So any of you out there want fantastic production managers and production coordinators, Oh, well, see, Kim's right in front of you, who is our curriculum manager. Please go and see Kim. There we go. Thank you, Jenny.
June and I were having a bit of a chat before we came here about the key things that we found that work in terms of technical education and making sure that all of our students and graduates are as well prepared as they can be to enter into the industry, even if perhaps for me that they're right at the very beginning of their careers, or certainly transferring careers as well with you, June. And one of the key things I think we talked about was very much that collaboration and making sure that we're co-designing and co-delivering the curriculum, so co-designing with employers in the industry and also having opportunities to co-deliver. And what we try and do is build in lots and lots of opportunities for our students to interact with people who are working in the industry, who can tell them what it's really like in the industry, particularly in terms of expectations, whether that's timing, whether that's making sure that they can meet production run schedules, etc. So that it's as realistic a learning environment as we can try and do. And actually, we want to do as much of that as we can. So anybody here that's interested in collaborating with us, that would be great. But I think we found that was quite a common theme, that co-design and co-delivery.
Absolutely. We talked a lot about the word etiquette, which is an interesting word, and the word how to behave on a studio floor, on a film set. It's quite difficult sometimes. All of us were new to the industry. How, when you walk onto a studio floor, how to behave. There is a hierarchy. We have to accept that. And there is a way of doing things in a collaborative way, in an appropriate way. And quite frankly, that's a soft skill that we teach day one. It's really super important. And I guess hopefully that's why our students go on and our alumni go on to actually work in the industry, because they learn that that's very intrinsic in their day-to-day practice.
And I think another thing we talked about, and actually it's already been mentioned today, about experiential learning. And so the way that we teach is really important. So we try and teach through project-based learning, because it's actually really hard to teach a student to collaborate, to communicate. Actually, what you've got to do is build it as sort of golden threads throughout everything that you do with them, and give the students lots of opportunities to practice, to learn, to get it wrong, to see the consequences of getting it wrong, trying to have to rectify it. And so we build in real life, usually where possible employer-led projects, so that students know that they've got to achieve something at the end. Along the way, they tick off a whole load of assessment criteria and get a fantastic grade, but actually it's the learning on those projects that really makes the difference. And I know you were saying you do something quite similar.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us as well, we talk about industry, we've been really privileged. It's slightly more easy for us in that they're adult learners from our perspective. So when industry offer us work placements, it's easier, we can send them without any chaperones, etc. But industry already have been really, really good to us across the entire board. And so many of our students, after work experience, have then been offered roles. And that for us is amazing. It's wonderful. So thank you, industry, for supporting us.
And actually an ask from me, and I think a challenge that we face when we're encouraging young people to see this sector as a really vibrant sector and something within which they can find their own place. For under 18-year-olds, it's actually a real challenge for us to find really good, meaningful work experience placements, and certainly I don't know whether anyone's heard of the T-level, but when the T-level in broadcast media production comes on stream next year, there is an obligation in there for students to study about a 45-day industry placement, not necessarily with the same employer, but if they don't achieve that, then they don't pass their T-level. And if that's the key technical route and the technical qualification for a 16-year-old into this industry, we've got a challenge, I think, between educators and employers to find out how we can make that work and think creatively. So that's a sort of challenge to throw out, really.
Absolutely.
I don't think many people know about T-levels.
Oh, okay.
I think you're right. No, anybody seen the government adverts? No. No, so you're right. And
Two educators.
In the cinema? Oh. Excellent. Yeah, so T-levels, just as a very quick recap, brand new level 3, so A-level equivalent qualification, 1 T-level equals 3 A-levels. And those are designed with employers. There are particular ones related to particular sectors. So the media, broadcast and production one will come online next September. And it's sort of 80% of time spent in college learning environments, 20% of the time spent out on industry placement. So it's the flip of an apprenticeship, if you like, which is 80% on the job, 20% on a college classroom. So it's that way. It's coming to a college very near you very soon. And the other thing I think I wanted to talk about as well was, and I think this is one of the things that makes our education, so the technical education, very different from perhaps school-based education, is we make sure that we employ teachers who have worked in the industry, and so not only know what it's like from a theoretical point of view, but have actually been in the industry, have worked in the industry, and know how it actually works for the students.
Absolutely, I concur with that. And actually, I will say from an education perspective, I'm an example of somebody who worked in the media industry for many years, definitely more than 2 digits. But I went and worked, I was approached with the FE sector, and I was actually supported financially to do my postgraduate, my PGCE, and I subsequently did a master's. That is something that from an industry perspective, we must encourage that industry practitioners who proactively want to move into education, we should be still financially supporting that, because that overall increases the efficacy of everything we do. So I was really surprised, first of all, that I was offered that, but really gracious. And actually, Admission College is where I did it. So it comes full circle, Jenny.
Exactly, on alumni right here. And I think it's also thinking about creative and innovative ways to collaborate. So we work closely with creative media skills in Pinewood. It's a level 4 course, and we work together. So they bring in industry experts in sort of 6-week blocks, if you like, to teach our students, and we provide the pastoral care, the support for the assessment, the liaison with the awarding body, all of that stuff. But we all work together, and our students get a fantastic experience, whether that's prop making, whether it's set direction, whatever it is. And it's a really innovative way to meld those two things together, so the industry and education, for the benefit of the students.
Perfect. I'm looking at this gentleman. You look like we're almost out of time, are we? No? Oh.
Please relax.
Please. Oh, he's very relaxed, isn't he?
Can I ask you
yes.
about what your move to Wickham is
Oh, yes. Good point, good question, Robert. So at the moment we have 3 campuses. We have a campus in Aylesbury, and we have a campus in Amersham, and one in Flackwell Heath. And we've got plans to transition our provision from Amersham and Flackwell Heath into a brand new campus right in the heart of High Wycombe. So we know for our students that accessibility is absolutely key. So being right in the heart of High Wycombe, we're opposite the bus station, we're about 5 minutes walk from the train station. That will make that much more accessible, and it will be a brand new sort of 8-storey technical education facility. We're hoping to open that in September 25. We've got the majority of our planning permission through, just a few sort of wrangles to go with that. But what we'll be doing is moving and transitioning all of our creative provision from Amersham into that new building, and it's giving us a great opportunity to really think how we do that, think about the resources, the teaching facilities, etc. that we need, and make sure that we build those in right from the ground up. So that's really exciting for us, and that should be 2 years' time.
Good evening, everybody. My name is John Browning, and I am Workforce Skills Manager for Buckinghamshire Business First. Very exciting to be here this evening, not just because of the illustrious audience and the speakers we've had this evening, and what a fantastic event it's been. Thank you very much, Robert, for inviting us along. But also, I grew up around here, and I used to pass by the gates of these very studios on my way to primary school every day, and this is the first time I've ever been in. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of where we are with the Local Skills Improvement Plan, or LSIP to its friends, and what we're doing over the next few months to complete the plan for Buckinghamshire. For those who don't know, Buckinghamshire Business First is a not-for-profit organisation. We work very closely with the Buckinghamshire Local Enterprise Partnership. We deliver the Growth Hub and the Skills Hub for Buckinghamshire, and we provide a range of business support services for Buckinghamshire businesses. We're a membership organisation. We have 14,000 business members in Buckinghamshire. And my role at BBF is to provide businesses with support for their training and skills needs. Over the past 2 years, we've collaborated with the Buckinghamshire LEP to develop the Buckinghamshire Local Skills Report, which provides an analysis of the local skills market and the skills needs for Buckinghamshire. It's downloadable from our website. It's a great read. I urge you to take a look at it. What I thought I'd start off by doing just quickly is explaining what a local skills improvement plan is. So just very quickly, it is the government's blueprint for reshaping post-16 technical education and skills system to better meet the needs of employers. It's intended to be employer-led. The government talks about placing employers at the heart of the skills system, where of course they should be. It requires local areas to identify and agree a set of actionable priorities which will drive change. And they hope that LSIPs will facilitate new dynamic working relationships between employers, training and education providers. We've spoken a lot about that this evening, so it's great to hear some of that now coming out. And we have to produce our report to the Secretary of State by the 31st of May this year. It is a 3-year plan. What are we seeking to change? Well, all post-16 technical education and training is in scope. This means provision which leads to skilled employment, draws its purpose from the workplace rather than from an academic discipline. So this includes apprenticeships, vocationally related qualifications, BTEC, City and Guilds, those kinds of things. Short courses like certifications, for example, that certain industry sectors will have. Higher technical qualifications, a lot of talk you may have heard about higher technical qualifications, kind of redressing the balance. Higher education's been very successful at attracting people onto academic courses. Hopefully higher technical qualifications will attract more people into vocationally related qualifications. Also degree apprenticeships, quietly causing a little revolution in higher education. But it also includes non-accredited provision that can either be publicly or privately funded. And this is not just about better opportunities for young people. We'll also be looking at issues affecting skills development for the existing workforce. Now I can already hear the sceptical amongst you saying, how is this different from previous skills initiatives? And I think there is a real difference. First of all, it's local. So although this is a national initiative, it's being implemented on a local basis. Previous skills initiatives, like apprenticeship reform, for example, or the implementation of T-levels, have been carried out at a national level. The LSIP is a local plan based on local employer skills needs. Secondly, it comes with some genuine teeth. There will be a thing called the Local Skills Improvement Fund introduced this year for providers to make the changes which are suggested in the Local Skills Improvement Plan. And the new Skills and Post-16 Education Act places a duty on providers to take account of the LSIP under new things called accountability agreements, and progress against these will be monitored by Ofsted. Some genuine teeth behind the proposals that are coming out. So it's a fantastic opportunity to drive change locally. Now then, in developing our plan for Buckinghamshire, there are a few key things we must consider. Number one, we can't do everything. Post-16 education and training is a massive area. We can't do everything. So we must focus on the areas where the biggest impact can be made. So that would mean focusing on specific industry sectors or specific skills themes, like maybe digital skills. We must also consider that not all skills shortages are caused by shortcomings in post-16 education and training. We can't do anything about issues under the Local Skills Improvement Plan. We can't do anything about issues related to pay, conditions, those kinds of things. It is purely about changes to post-16 education and training. We've also got to think about developing learner demand. There's been some talk about that this evening. As well as understanding employer needs, we've got to encourage young people and encourage people generally to take up technical and vocational education. We've also got to think about how it affects SEND learners and those people who are furthest from the workplace. There's been a lot of talk about diversity this evening, which is great. Buckinghamshire Business First's role in producing the LSIP is to bring together the employers and the providers, to provide the labour market research and analysis, to produce the Local Skills Improvement Plan report, and then work with our neighbouring LSIP areas where needed on issues of common concern. Our job then will be to support the delivery of the plan and keep it under review. So this brings me on to where we are in terms of the priorities for Buckinghamshire. And the first step in developing our Local Skills Improvement Plan obviously will be to understand which industry sectors and which skills themes we need to prioritise. Those priority sectors were established by mapping the sectors with the highest unemployment, the biggest impact on the local economy. We also looked at those sectors which are included as growth sectors in the local industrial strategy, the strategic economic plan, and Buckinghamshire Council's recovery and growth proposal, of course, and the levelling up plans. We also looked at cross-cutting skills needs, so soft skills have been mentioned this evening, IT and digital skills, customer-related skills, those kinds of things. And we also will be looking at cross-sectoral developments, so in particular the drive for sustainability, net zero, and digitalisation. So as a result of this work, we have identified 5 priority sectors for Buckinghamshire and 3 cross-sector skills themes. And these are construction. I'm sure you'll be aware that there are some major infrastructure projects going on in the county at the moment, causing major skills shortages in that sector. Engineering, almost 20% of the Bucks economy is in engineering and manufacturing, and we have almost no engineering provision in the county. Need to do something about that. Digital. Digital is a very significant influence in Buckinghamshire with skills shortages across a number of sectors, driven by the adoption of new technologies, and the pace of change is not being matched by the uptake of digital education. So that's a key sector for us to look at. Health and social care, another important sector, largest employer in the county, probably the largest employer in most LSIP areas to be fair, but it's got acute recruitment and retention difficulties. And then finally we've identified the film and TV sector, you'll be glad to hear. And then our cross-cutting themes include digital skills, work readiness. This is something that came out very strongly in our local skills report, that people coming out of education were not work ready. We've got to understand what we mean by that and what we can do about it. Okay then, so if we look at the film and TV sector, employs approximately 3,000 people in Buckinghamshire, which is only 1.3% of Buckinghamshire's workforce, but the sector is the highest growing in the past 5 years of any sector in Buckinghamshire. And of course that does not include those people who are self-employed. And Buckinghamshire has a large number of self-employed people, and a large proportion of those work in film and TV. Also, of course, all the new jobs that are being created by all the things we've talked about this evening, new developments that are going on, the expansion of Pinewood, 4,000 new jobs. If Marlow gets the go-ahead, maybe 4,000 new jobs. Then there's expansion in other areas as well, potential studios in High Wycombe, and then neighbouring areas, Sunset Studios, Shepperton Studios, Sky Studios at Elstree, Shinfield, the list goes on. Some of these are just proposals, of course, but the direction of travel is pretty clear, isn't it? A massive need for skills in this sector. So we've started looking at this. We've started bringing together employers and providers to see what the skills needs are, what can we do about it. It was really interesting to hear Gareth talking earlier on about some of those, some of those are the conversations that we'll be having. in Buckinghamshire too. And a wide range of occupations with suffering from skills shortages have been identified in production, virtual production, visual effects, post-production. In fact, over 40 occupations currently identified where then there are skills shortages, and we'll need to get together and agree where the key priorities are so that we can focus on those as part of our local skills improvement plan. Obviously, whatever solution does come out of the local skills improvement plan, it needs to align with national activities, such as the skills strategy, the BFI hubs, as well as the careers activities and training solutions that are going on locally. It also needs to be aligned with our neighbouring LSIPs, and we'll be having conversations with them because, you know, around here they have similar skills needs. But there is a fantastic opportunity in Bucks to pilot some solutions to some of the issues we've been talking about this evening, perhaps hothouse some of those ideas. And some of the ideas that are coming out of the discussions that we've had so far include you know, creating some sort of a hub to bring together employees, freelancers, bring the employers and the providers together in some way, maybe a bit like the way that the Health and Social Care Academy has done in Buckinghamshire. So it's very interesting to hear what David Sines was saying earlier on. Competence frameworks, one of the things that Gareth mentioned, that's coming out of our discussions. How can we help people navigate their way through a sector, identify what skills they've got and what roles they could be taking up. How we co-opt in-house training with training which is provided locally. Making available provision for line managers in good people management skills, that was mentioned earlier on too. Develop good working practices in the sector. Maximising career guidance, that came out earlier on, I was interested to hear. Very, very important that young people can understand what the entry points are into the sector and their way through. And then another thing that came out earlier on, which is rethinking the way apprenticeships work. Perhaps looking at the funding, perhaps looking at the kind of model that we use, perhaps a more flexible model around apprenticeships, and maybe something which aligns more closely to the way people really enter the sector, perhaps as runners maybe. We could also look at existing skills initiatives that are underway, like skills boot camps. These are designed to enable people to transfer from one sector to another, and you can automatically see ways that that might work for film and TV, you know, maybe from the construction sector into set building, maybe from beauty into makeup, and lots of different ways we can get people to transfer into the sector. These are all things that we're going to be working on in the local skills improvement plan. There's a lot of work still to do, and I should emphasise that the local skills improvement plan is a process as well as a plan. And I look forward to having many discussions with as many of you as we can during the course of developing it. So thanks very much for listening.
John, thank you for hosting us today.
Pleasure.
We've talked a lot about all the world-beating stuff that's happening in Buckinghamshire, and it's really important that we remember that in the middle of Buckinghamshire you have a film school which is the envy of the world. I mean, the NFTS is probably the greatest film school in the world. You can't say that, or you could. I can. So perhaps you tell us very, very quickly a little bit about the school, but also I was hoping you might just elaborate a bit on a couple of initiatives which you know close to my heart. One is this fantastic initiative with Amazon, attracting one of the biggest streamers to come here to train creative people for themselves, which is great. And of course the BFI Film Academy, which goes to the heart, but fairly briefly.
Okay, so the National Film Television School's been here for 50 years. We celebrated our 50th anniversary just a year ago. The film studios here has been here 100 years, so it's got a real legacy as British Lion Studios. 23 students walked in the doors of the NFTS in 1971, and we're now 750 strong as kind of MA and diploma, and we train around 1,000 people a year on short courses. So we're probably one of the biggest providers of film and television education in the UK. Our job is effectively to provide the people behind the camera at HOD level. So we're trying to take people who can leave the school and within 3 or 4 months shoot Ted Lasso, can do the music for Heartstopper. And they're two examples of people who graduated last February, because we run January to December, and immediately walked out into those jobs. So that's what we're trying to do. We get lots of people apply. It's quite lumpy. And what I mean by that is we get 400 people apply to be a director. We get 30 people apply to be a sound recordist. So there is absolutely a problem with communication around what these jobs are. I did speakers for schools yesterday at a school in Hertford, and they're all blown away by the idea that there's jobs for electricians and carpenters and accountants, and we've got much more to do in telling that story. Those two initiatives you mentioned, both things I'm really proud of. We worked together 11, 12 years ago on the establishment of the Film Academy. Ed was asked earlier about an initiative that you could do at school age to get involved in film and television education, and the BFI Film Academy is that. It's delivered UK-wide. I think there's 50 regional centres, a couple in Bucks, and then the film school offers a 2-week residential funded by the DFE and lottery for 66 of those 1,000 kids to come to the NFTS in Beaconsfield for 2 weeks and kind of take that experience to another level. I think that academy is, I think it's the thing we'll point to in 10 years' time and say that's where the new Edgar Wright came from, the new Steve McQueen, because I think it is doing great work in helping young people in schools and colleges move into a whole other level of experience. And then the second one, which is a new initiative we set up with Prime Video last year, was to establish a trainee scheme where we recruited 25 people, we had 400 applicants, we took 25, they get a salary from the NFTS for a year, and then when they're not on an Amazon production, they're here training. So effectively it addresses the issues around the fact that production is piecemeal, and you might only need somebody for 2 or 3 weeks or 3 months, and then what do those people do next? And as a 18, 19-year-old, that's a hugely scary thing if you're trying to build your life and career. And also we can do all the wraparound care around housing, pastoral support, mental health support. So that's the first year with the guys from Amazon. There's some of here at the back, and we're really proud of it, and we want to grow it from 25 to bigger numbers. So that's the plan with that.
I think it's great you're funding that, Amazon, I really do. So next time we watch Amazon, just remember that behind that film we're watching, that some of that money is going into training the very industry we're here to talk about today. So good partnership. So John, I thought we should go to sort of pull back a bit from a lot of the detail we've been on today, and we've touched on it quite a lot, but to look at the wider political environment, because there's things that have really struck me today. So Ed talked about he'd been in a constant battle with getting creativity and creative industries and film onto the political agenda. He was right. I always found it very ironic when I was at the BFI. It was 2019 actually, when I think it was the summer statement from the Chancellor, and they said that the country had been kept out of recession by, rather quaintly, the moving picture business, which was very spiky. So on one hand, you know, we've got ministers deriding media studies, and on the other hand, there's a recognition that actually it's the future, it's the business of the future. So it's interesting to think what because you're more in the swim nowadays, what you think the future's going to look like. We've talked about the T levels, slightly worrying they've been put off because could have been a rather good indication, particularly for vocational skills. So how do you see it, and where do you see the school pivoting in the moving context?
Oh, it's really challenging. I don't know if I'm an optimist about it, really. I feel a bit pessimistic. I think T levels are really problematic, not because I don't want them to work, but because the amount of placement hours you need to make them successful has just not been thought through and considered. And I've never been invited to a meeting to talk about how to solve that. Maybe other people in the room have, but I think there are a lot of employers who are totally unaware that this is a thing that's coming down the tracks. I think we need to think creatively about how we deliver those placement opportunities, which might not be on real productions, but might be on simulated productions. So that's going to take some creative thinking. I think the apprenticeship thing is a real problem. In the film and TV area, I understand that there's around £25 million spent by film and TV companies that effectively is a tax to the Treasury. I was with ITV the other day. They estimate they spend about £1.5 million on the levy, and they see none of it back. Yeah. So, and I've also heard people effectively give up on it. So I heard some colleagues from some other organisations say it was just too difficult, don't bother. So we're actually about to advertise here for an apprenticeship development manager, and we're going to fund that post for 2 years and say, because we've got such great relationships with BBC, ITV,
I know you have.
Prime Video, and so it's like, can we leverage those relationships to try and find a solution to this? And we may not succeed. It's beaten better people than me, so we'll see. But we cannot leave that 25 million in the drawer.
Yeah.
When,
I agree.
and then the third thing I think is the BFI put a call out for production spend, about 1% of production spend to be spent on skills. And I think that was met with a sense from the industry of, oh, we don't really want to do that, or it sounds like a lot of money. In Ireland it's 2.5%, by the way, so it's not a lot of money. And I think David Putnam, I understand, is about to release some research in April where he's basically modelled if you don't do something around skills, what it means for wages. And actually it makes the 1% figure look tiny. So I think hopefully people are starting to catch on to this, that we need employers to step up and spend more money. We're in a really privileged position here. Amazon are doing that with us, the BBC, ITV, but that's not typical for every college provider or group. So how do we scale up what is quite a boutique industry into a much more industrialised model?
I mean, there are lots of things there, aren't there? One is the apprenticeship levy, Gareth, where I was absolutely astonished that hasn't been resolved yet, because it's insane that money is going specifically to deliver the very skills that this industry needs. And actually, the way it's designed prohibits it actually helping. And that's because productions don't last for a year neatly, which is what's required. And presumably that's the same thing with the T-level. So for those people with influence in this room, it would be great if when these really important education initiatives come out of government, some thought could be given to how it might apply for businesses that don't fill that, September to July thing. Wouldn't it be really, really helpful? Okie doke, so to move on quickly to the BFI strategy, not the whole strategy, because we'll be here for the whole thing. Obviously, I read it with huge interest, having worked with Gareth on the first one we did about 7 years ago. And I thought it was very clever the way that they have put absolutely front and foremost this notion of partnership. As you say, it's got to be a partnership between industry and education providers. But then I sort of know that, as you say, we're mainly a cottage industry. Most film companies and TV companies are small. They're scrabbling around to get their next production going, and that's hard enough anyway without adding additional burdens on them. So I was going to ask you, because obviously you're going to have to tackle this one as well. Practically, how do you think that could or might work?
Well, the BFI plan is, for those who don't know, is to establish skills clusters across the UK and to use lottery money to develop initiatives that are locally focused. We've been involved with a bid, we don't know if we've got it, but we've been involved with a bid around Buckinghamshire, Surrey and Hertfordshire, also partnering with colleagues in London, because our concern was it was going to become about levelling up only, and actually we are the engine of film and TV production in this region, and without a bid from providers in this county, it felt like that would get missed. I think it's a really clever idea if it works, which is to say, who are the anchor tenants in those areas? So Pinewood, maybe Marlow in the future, Shepperton, Leavesden. How do you use those as an engine of access and inclusion, and who are the educational partners who can help deliver that? But Gareth's point is right. It's 800 grand of lottery money over a period of years. So it's not very much money really. And the only way it's going to work is if industry comes in and supports it and matches that money, and local councils and other let money and others ties into that as well. So I met with Martin, leader of the council. He was telling me about the Buckinghamshire levelling up areas, and that there's bits of cash to support activity. We've got to tie all this together. So I think the group that John pulls together is really key in making sure those conversations are had. We want to play our part in that. We need the Amazons to play their part in that. We need Pinewood to play their part in that. And it's, as Gareth said, we've been saying that for a long time. Yeah. So we've actually got to do it.
Yeah. I mean, it is astonishing, isn't it? Again, and Gareth heard this from me for years, and we're both talking this mantra now that education for this sector has depended on trying to get some contribution from industry, which is already hard pushed in most areas, and lottery money. Instead of, you know, if it's such a big industry, why on earth isn't it funded, or why isn't it formalised properly within the education system? And in a way that I would argue that the discussions have moved on from just creativity, because actually we're more in that CP snow area now where we need a mix of the science, the technology and the arts, because actually most of what we're dealing with now and you're dealing with here in the school, those skills are needed, aren't they? In the games industry, they're crying out for people who've got that combination of skills. So we almost need a new approach there, I would have thought. John, don't move, because what we're going to do is we're going to see if there are any questions that people would like to throw at you or any of our speakers that we've had today. Christine, because I saw you first.
It's not so much a question, it's a point that I wanted to mention earlier because of Gareth. Where is Gareth? Hello! Well, I do want to ask you about that river handball shoot, because obviously I used to live there, but we won't talk about that. So there is actually a company, and probably a few, that have wellbeing facilitators, and that's something I would really encourage studios and productions to look into. One is called 6 Foot from the Spotlight. They ensure there's mental health measures on set, they manage bullying, breaks, if overtime is reasonable, and it's a real resource that just isn't staple right now, and it should really just be a default for everyone.
It's really a question to John. In your talk, you mentioned everything except parents and educators, which is disappointing because it's the educators that you want to get in to help this industry. You want to get them to talk to the parents, to make parents realise that, you know, being in the film industry is not a sort of just today. And I would hope that that is in your improvement plan, because if it isn't, you need to rewrite it. Just to tell you that, okay? Opportunity bucks is something that Martin Tett has put into place, levelling up. And there are 6 wards in Wickham. One of them is the ward I represent, which is where Bucks College is going, which I'm really looking forward to. And I think that that's another thing. We do have some funding there, and let's talk about it, because we have a skills, don't want to say, part of Opportunity Bucks. We need to talk, and it needs to go into your skills plan. Have you got Opportunity Bucks in your skills plan? Because if you haven't, you should.
You're absolutely right, and I thought I'd mentioned the importance of entry points and career pathways and providing alternative routes for young people, but I agree absolutely with you. All those things should definitely be in the plan.
So yeah, I wanted to make a point. I've been in this industry a long time. I've seen visual effects from its beginning to where it is today with virtual production, been around lots and lots of people trying to make it work. And just as a side point, they are suffering hugely with talent. But I think the point I want to make is that you've talked about educators, and I've over the years given the NFTS and Ravensbourne lots of equipment. That's brilliant. And you talked about the TV companies and the film companies, and that's great too. The thing you're forgetting is the manufacturers, right? These are the people who are actually driving the technology. So virtual production didn't come around because some director decided to use it. It came around because people started experimenting, showing this technology at SIGGRAPH, and began to mature it so it actually could be used on shoots. And manufacturers are constantly having to, innovate more and more technology, and so things are changing really quickly. And that presents a problem with universities because they get budgets, they spend, what did some of them spend recently? Huge amounts of money. And that's going to last them for about 5 years. Well, the tech is going to move forwards. And so the tech companies are really key in this, in that they need to be completely integrated to the universities. So those technological innovations are feeding through to the university. So for example, the company I just left, we basically put people on set, on shoots. They're on set right now in Poland, and they'll come back and they'll re-educate the guys delivering the academy course on virtual production. And that's a cycle that continues, and that works really well.
But just don't forget the manufacturers. I mean, my whole career, we've been taking in students, usually from places like Bournemouth and Poole and Ravensbourne, and we'll output 4 or 6 students and they automatically get jobs. But that needs to be on a much wider scale. And don't forget also the manufacturers actually have full-time employment. So kids can go out on set, come back, and then carry on their normal job. So yeah, really important, I think we include them.
That's a good point, thank you. Right, there's a gentleman, oh, it's Gareth.
Sorry, I was
Still
just
a
going to
gentleman.
say, let's not stop at the manufacturers. Let's talk about the whole value chain. Let's talk about the studios, the property developers. Let's talk about everyone that earns crust out of filmed content in the UK. And I think, you know, we've identified 4 subsets, being education, government, industry, and other. But absolutely, if we're going to solve this, then everyone has to play a part, and to include the manufacturers, the studios, the cinemas, even the platforms that put things out. You know, it's a collegiate effort. I've tried to compare this to the challenge we faced as an industry with COVID. We faced that down. We wrote the protocols, we got filming again. We were one of the first jurisdictions in the world to start or restart physical production. That's because everyone got together behind a common goal, and that's what we need in the skills space now.
Thank you, Gareth.
So I introduced myself earlier as Neal Hatton from the UK Screen Alliance, but I also sit on the Creative Industries Council, which is a government convened council which is chaired by the Secretary of State for DCMS. And we've actually, through that, we've done a lot of work with DCMS and DFE on trying to make the apprenticeship levy work, such as, you know, the flexi-job apprenticeship schemes, which ScreenSkills have been very valiantly trying to get going. It's not easy, and it's not been a very easy journey at all because of resistance from the industry, because it's a cost. And I think one of the problems, I agree everything that Gareth said earlier about, you know, industry's got to step up on this as well. Everybody's got to stop blaming each other. We've got to put some effort into this. There is, if you look at the economy, the whole economy, there is an organisation called the 5% Club, and it was set up by the chair of Balfour Beatty. And to be a member of the 5% Club, your organisation has got to commit to having 5% of its workforce in paid training. That's 5%, not 1% like BFI are talking about, but 5%. So we're a long way off what is the expected norm. We really need to step up. And I think part of this problem is we are freelance dominated, particularly in production. We're also short-term project dominated. And the tendency is for everybody to think of training as a cost rather than an investment. And we've really got to change that mindset. And I wonder if there's anyone in the room thinking about how we're going to do that.
Thank you, Neal.
Again, Rebecca from Film London, but I just wanted to say, like, how amazing it is to be in a room full of people that I think the change this room can impact in the industry and the county is phenomenal. So I'm really glad I attended tonight. I also, if I can end on an up, I'm seeing a lot of change. I'm seeing we place 450 people into jobs in the industry every year, and we're speaking to studios, and they're willing to make change. So I'm seeing job shares. I'm seeing mothers working 2.5-day weeks and going home and job sharing, which I've never seen before. People with disabilities working as a team of 3, remote working. Accommodations are being made to maintain people in this industry. Studios are paying, like you say, Amazon. Netflix are putting teams in place that when you wrap on Killing Eve, they offer you a job on the next production Netflix has, so you don't have a gap. So there are significant changes taking place. And I also wanted to mention, like, we have 5,500 freelancers, and they're all now looking to train at colleges and institutions during their gaps or when they want to take a break from being on set. And this is giving career sustainment as well. So if any of you want access to some of our freelancers that were working 5 minutes ago on House of Dragon and now want to go teach, like, that opens opportunities for them to pay a mortgage as well. So good stuff is happening, and I feel so encouraged to be here. And thank you. That was all I wanted to say.
We're glad you're here, Rebecca.
Roy from Cube Studios. We're a production company, and we're just in the process of setting up a virtual production studio in Maidenhead. We work on the other side of things. We work in the commercial world. But just to Gareth's and Mike's point, we experience the same skills shortage that we were talking about here, especially in the virtual production space. now for us, it works perfect for us. It's brilliant, but we are struggling to get people through who can actually execute these productions. I'm curious as to whether, the NFTS and ScreenSkills work with organizations or SMEs to help us scale up people in the commercial space.
We don't differentiate whether it's commercials or high-end TV or film. We run a virtual production qualification here. We have an LED volume on one of our stages. We run Unreal workshops. We're thinking about virtual art department. That scheme is actually funded by Warner Brothers Discovery, so it's 16 places twice a year, 75% of the fees paid by Warner Brothers Discovery, 25% by the individual. So it costs the individual like 800 quid. And it's a 6-month course. And by the end of it, those people are all walking into jobs at DNEG and all sorts of different places. So if somebody from your firm wanted to do that, you can find that on our website.
Yeah, we have a work experience initiative called CubeUp. So we get kids to come in, but the difference being, because we believe you learn better by actually working on live stuff.
Yeah.
Big risk sometimes, but yeah, I think it's just a better way of learning and getting experience. So we're looking for organizations, people within industry who we can, we get these kids come in. Yes, they have experience within the commercial world, but thereafter there's countless things they could do. So if there's anyone out there who would want to speak, that'd be great.
Thank you very much.
It's not actually a question. I just wanted to make myself known to everyone here. I run a film and TV academy for young children based in Aylesbury, and I was a filmmaker myself as well as a young actor, and I'm really genuinely passionate about film education with young people. What we do is a weekend class where kids learn real practical filmmaking, professional equipment guided by industry experts. We've had some really good support from Odeon, as well as lots of really cool people that I've collaborated with. But if there's anyone in this room that feels like we could collaborate, or you could help me or I could help you, then I'm genuinely really interested. The education system didn't work great for me when I was at school, but as a teacher now myself to young people and someone who's passionate about film and acting, I feel like all of the problems we've talked about tonight, I really want to be part of solving those issues. Especially a lot of the education we've been talking about is towards the older kids, 16 to 18, but my age range is all the way from 8 years old all the way up to 18. And the passion that these kids have is so amazing. And in terms of these 20,000 jobs, there's definitely a huge amount of the next generation that is really interested in film. So yeah, I just echo what I just said. If anyone feels like they could collaborate with my company, my organisation, please get in touch, because I would love to do that.
Yeah, what's your name?
It's called the Film and TV Academy, FTA, and I've got lots of business cards on me, so if anyone fancies one, come and grab one off me after. Thank you.